All right, good evening, everyone. Calling to order the Tuesday, January 17th regular meeting, and we'll start off with our city clerk doing our roll call.
Mayor Kaylee Clark.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Amy Lamb.
Here.
Councilmember Karen Howe.
Here.
Councilmember Kent Treen.
Present.
Councilmember Pamela Stewart.
Here.
Councilmember Rituja Indapure.
Present.
Councilmember Roisin O'Farrell.
Present.
Great, thank you. Next, we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. Deputy Mayor Lamb, if you'll lead us. Thank you.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great, thank you. Next, we have our land acknowledgement statement. Do I have a volunteer?
I can do that.
Yeah, thank you.
We acknowledge that we are on the indigenous land of the Coast Salish peoples who have reserved treaty rights to this land, specifically the Snoqualmie Indian tribe. We thank these caretakers for this land who have lived and continue to live here since time immemorial.
Great, thank you. Next, I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Clarification, please.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Mayor, I'd like a point of clarification, please, on the agenda before we pass it.
Yes.
So on item number 17, the public hearing, I noticed that the procedure said that people may speak during the public commenting period.
Yes.
The question is, are people who may not have had the time to get here yet have the ability to also speak during the public hearing after the presentation on item number 17?
Yeah, so as far as I know, it has been noticed since last week that the proposed censure resolution, any public comments is to be during the public comment period at the beginning of the meeting.
That's correct, Mayor. That's what went out with the, excuse me, with the agenda notice from last week.
Great.
So the point would be, though, that a public hearing is for the public to be able to hear all sides of it and then be able to make comment. It seems a little odd that we wouldn't be allowing the public to actually hear the arguments and then make comment to that.
Yeah, I
Seems a
guess
little backwards to me.
the only thing at this point, I guess, would be an amendment or changing the agenda, but it has been approved and noticed since last week.
So I move that we amend the agenda so that we could take public hearing during the public hearing for the censure on Councilmember Kent Treen.
Is there a second? All right, so it will stay as stand that amendment fails. So public comment will be first and your public hearing will be second. I believe the first thing under unfinished business after we approve the consent calendar. So next, or still, I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
All right, so 6-1, our agenda is approved. So next, we will move into public comment. I see we have our Lego team here. So first, we'll start in the room. And as Councilmember Treen mentioned, public comment will be both for the proposed censure resolution and for public comment for the meeting. So first up, I have Todd. Oh, sorry, Scott? Yeah.
Pardon me, Mayor. If I may, maybe it makes sense to have the Lego team go first before we dive into the rest of public comment.
That would make sense. So we have, is it Creatively Cool? Cool. So I don't know if you guys want to stand right over here. The council has chosen to give you 5 minutes to present to us. So over here, you can stand, there's a microphone, and you'll be on camera. And start when you're ready.
Can they pull that? Yeah, they can. Yeah, put it up there. Yeah. Let them stand in front maybe with the mic? Should they stand in front with the mic? You won't see them if they get behind the podium.
I'm right here. Oh, okay, this works. No, I got it. Hi, my name is Anika, and this is Chen Ting. We are representing our FLL team, Creatively Cool. I would like to introduce Steppy, the Stepinator. Great name, right? You might wonder, what do you do with Steppy? Well, the answer is in the name. When you step on Steppy, it generates energy, which spins a DC motor, which charges rechargeable batteries. It's a little too fragile to step on right now because it's just a model.
Oh.
Using Steppy could reduce big school energy bills by a good amount. The average annual high school bill is $158,500 in the USA. By placing Steppy into visited or crowded areas such as schools or tourist attractions, it will create a good amount of energy.
As we all know, fossil fuels are the biggest source of energy used by countries like the United States, China, and India because it's efficient and reliable. It's obvious issues like it has a lot of pollution and it's not renewable, and a high chance of running out. According to MAHB, fossil fuels will run out by 2052, natural gas by 2060, and coal by 2090. Renewable energy sources like solar panels are unreliable because you don't know when the next light is going to come out. If you use Steppy, it's not only reliable, but you can also use it at any time in any conditions.
We wanted a localized solution out of everyday things to increase reliability, and we are exploring regenerative sources. Our other ideas were to make smaller wind turbines, which inspired our field trip to Wild Horse Wind and Solar Farm. Then we had the idea to harvest rainwater with a turbine. Then we realized that walking was sort of a thing that everybody did daily. So we thought of adding a step in a pair of shoes, but then we realized that would be very uncomfortable because you would have to walk around like this all day. So we decided that a step in the ground would be much more better because as you step on it, it wouldn't be uncomfortable at all because it's in the ground. It's not, So our innovation project, Steppy, was born. Next, we had to figure out where. We realized it had to be somewhere big with lots of people and lots of energy being used. Schools are big, and there are lots of kids, and there are lots of energy is being used in lights, etc. So, in a standard high or middle school, you walk in the halls from classroom to classroom daily. The pedal would generate energy, which would then charge a rechargeable battery, which schools would then use for microphones, smart boards, etc.
Now I'm going to talk about Create. Steppy is an 8x4-inch piece of board that is flat on the ground. It transfers stepping motion to a DC generator through a gear train. We originally wanted to put the pedals on the floor that were slanted so that when you press on it, it would create energy to charge an AA battery with every 1,800 steps. But then it was pointed out that people on the other side would see it as an obstacle because, well, it's really hard to go like that. So we made it flat on the ground and it barely reaches over so that you don't have to change your behavior when you're walking. This model costed around $40 to make, but Steppy can charge at least 30 batteries a month. We decided to focus on schools because they are the core of our society. Kids can be kind of aggressive, so we decided with the actual model, we should use materials like steel. then it might be able to generate more energy than before, along with being more compact.
We have showed our project to school teachers, engineers from Boeing, Microsoft, etc. We've received great feedback and excitement on the adoption of STEPI. We would like to get your feedback. Would you be interested in adopting STEPI or allowing us to do trial runs in your schools?
Great, thank you, guys. That was awesome. Thank you so much for the presentation. I think we would be more than happy to follow up via email. I love the name Steppy. I don't know who came up with that. Is that you? She's very shy now, yeah. Thank you all for coming, and I love the shirts. I love what you all are doing, and thank you for the presentation. We really appreciate it.
Can we get a picture with Steppy? I want a picture with Steppy.
Sure. Yeah, that'd be awesome. Yeah. Sure.
Oh my God, guys, let's go. Oh, is it just us?
All right, everybody ready? Everybody set? 1, 2, 3.
Here's your notes.
Thank you for reaching out to us as well. I'm so glad you guys are here. All right, so now we are back to our in-house public comments first before we move to online. So each person will have 3 minutes. So first up, we have Todd. And if there is anyone who didn't get a chance to sign up, I can get your name after.
Hello, Mayor Clark, Deputy Mayor Lamb, council members. My name is Todd Langton. I am a homeowner who lives at 22219 Northeast 12th Place, Sammamish, 98074. I have lived in this community for more than 25 years. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. People elect city council members to represent them and their views in positions of community leadership. How members of this council behave reflects directly on Sammamish and its residents. Last year, the public became aware, as a result of a public records request, that former Sammamish City Manager Dave Rudat texted Kent Treen and others requesting that they delete this after you read it, referencing a public record. The top administrative official in the city of Sammamish asked a sitting council member to delete public records in violation of the Washington State Public Records Act. What did Councilmember Treen do when asked to break the law? According to the resolution before you, he failed to report the incident. As an elected council member, he was required by law to complete training on the Public Records Act, so he should have been familiar with the requirements. Maybe he missed the section about deleting public records being illegal. In my opinion, he failed everyone who lives in Sammamish by failing to report this event. Did he fail to report other such events? We don't know, because what we've learned as residents of this city is that Kent Treen didn't raise the alarm when asked to conduct an illegal act. I strongly advocate that this council censure Councilmember Treen and prevent him from representing Sammamish residents on government and community bodies outside our boundaries. How will officials from other communities view him moving forward? Can he be effective on our behalf? In my opinion, he cannot. And finally, what message do we send to future council members if we do not hold Councilmember Treen accountable for his choices? This council and the new city manager are working hard to operate with transparency, integrity, and bring true leadership back to Sammamish. We have a chance to finally move forward toward an even brighter future. While I know this is a difficult step, we can only get there by holding accountable elected officials who violate the public trust. Thank you very much. And I have copies of this that I'll leave with the clerk. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Jennifer.
My name is Jennifer Kim, and today 6 of you are deciding whether or not to censure your fellow councilmember Kent Treen for not reporting a text that he received 3 years ago along with Deputy Mayor Christy Malchow from former city manager Dave Rudat. The city IT department was able to see that he did receive the text, but he didn't respond to it or do what it asked, which was to delete it after it was received. The search also showed that he did not delete any public records related to him or the city. And to his knowledge, he doesn't even remember receiving the text. And I think we can all attest to having received texts that we either have missed or ignored. Now, to my knowledge, there is no rule as city council members that you are deemed to be mandatory reporters of each other's or other city officials' actions. That's part of what living in the US makes it great. This is not a police state. You each have the ability to make informed decisions without having to tattle on each other for doing something differently than maybe you would. So since Councilmember Treen hasn't been proven to have done anything illegal, it's really interesting that he's being brought up for censure. If he's censured, he will be removed from council committees that he's currently serving on which are the East Side Transportation, the Kokanee Work Group, and the Public Issues Committee, which would essentially silence the only voice on the council who is not aligned with the majority view of greatly increasing the development in Sammamish. He's been a high school teacher for over 17 years and has been a staunch environmentalist well before he joined the council. He has served on the Kokanee Work Group along with Native Americans and local expert Wally Pereira in trying to prevent the Kokanee from being extinct. He's been a member of the Sammamish Stewards for over 10 years, where they've removed invasive plant species and planted native plants in Sammamish. He's also worked endlessly on updating stormwater regulations to protect clean water for our lakes and streams and to prevent residents who live downslope properties from being flooded. And before he ran for council, I actually met Kent when we worked together with residents to fight the high-density development for the Parker Plat, which had a historical building and a wildlife corridor, which has now been preserved. He ran on a platform of improved infrastructure, protection and enhancement of the environment, and to protect the character of the city. If Councilmember Treen is censured tonight, the residents will lose their final advocate for our environment in Sammamish. Even if you don't agree with the fellow council members' policies, that's not a justifiable reason to seek censure. And the whole purpose of a council is to have members with differing viewpoints, to represent the views of all the residents, and to have a semblance of balance. I ask that the council not censure Kent Treen. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is James.
James Eastman, Sammamish, Washington. I mentioned last week I have 100 acres in Sammamish and have some new ideas on how I'd like to use my property. The website is eastlakedevelopment.com. And I go back in time about 5 years. I took a trip with a friend to Switzerland. We were going to go on factory visits to see his equipment that he had in these factories. So I thought, oh, okay, during the week we'll just hang out at the factory, and then on the weekends we'll see Switzerland. So we got there, went and did the factory thing for a few days, but every single day, we were in this town called St. Gallen, I think is how you say it, but every single day I was pleased to find out that the town we were in was just amazing. I had no idea. I thought we had to go to like Zurich or Lucerne or some of the other areas of Switzerland for amazing experiences. But we were, in walkable downtowns that, had cathedrals, housing documents that were like 1,500 years old. We were up on a 50-year-old gondola up to the top to a timber-framed restaurant that was just spectacular. We were just doing amazing things. And the factory owner, was showing us the best that his town had to offer. So, and I don't think Switzerland is any more pretty than Sammamish is. I really don't. I think we have the same tremendous beauty here. But when I gave my neighbor a heads up of, some of the ideas I had for my property, he was born outside of the U.S. I think 30% of the people in Sammamish are. And his immediate reaction was like, yeah, why don't we have anything beautiful in Sammamish when I have visitors come from, this is the first time in the U.S. I have family come, and, I'm too embarrassed to put them in a hotel in Redmond. I have to put them in a hotel in Bellevue just to, save a little face. I'm joking about the nearest hotel to us is like the Wood Spring Inn there by Home Depot. I mean, for a place that is just as beautiful as it is, we do a really good job about hiding the beauty of our city. I sent a picture to council today of, the view from my property. It's looking through the trees, and it's a 6-mile view all across Lake Sammamish to Issaquah. I think probably the majority of our city doesn't even know that view exists or hasn't even seen it. So I'm hoping to engage with council and the city and the public to bring these beautiful areas to light. We shouldn't have to send visitors up to Victoria to see Bouchard Gardens or Vancouver to see Campalina Bridge Park. I mean, why can't we do that in Sammamish? It's just as pretty, has the same tremendous beauty. There's no point in hiding that. Thank you.
Thank you. Is it Upender?
Good evening. This is Upinder Dhinsa. I live at 215 East Lake Sammamish Parkway Southeast. I know some of you. Good to see a lot of new names. I've been a resident. I've known Lita for a long time. Been a resident of Sammamish and have invested a lot of money in Sammamish also. Live here, pay taxes, and do all kinds of things. I was involved in helping with the trail that was going on between the city of Sammamish and the King County initial fight. My reason for coming tonight is that when are we going to open up the City Hall much more than it is? I develop here, I build, I just finished my son's home. I want you to know that your inspectors are phenomenal. Your staff has been very good, but it has become a pain to come here 3, 4, 5 times. I just used to walk right in, get the answers quickly. I'm looking at a property right now. I have to send emails, I have to make phone calls, which by the way, these days in planning cost $133 for half hour, which I didn't know until I got the bill for almost $400. That's okay, it's not about money, but it's about, we have a beautiful City Hall building. I understand some people want to work offline, make it 1 or 2 days, but make them all available here so we can walk in, just get across, just get over it, whether it's Dawn or it is Steve or it is Missy. I mean, I've worked with every one of them for the last 10 years. Pam knows I've come here before. So my request is that let's get the city back going. If we need to help in any way, I'm happy to help. All your inspectors were out there every day inspecting and giving excellent guidance. All of them are very good, very knowledgeable, and I respect that. And so are your staff over here. But coming here and finding two little machines to check in, and then it says on your text, oh, your turn has come. There's nobody else in the room. 3 times I came, I asked, is there anybody else I can talk to, including David Pyle, whom I know. But there was nobody. I have to do it by email. I have to do it by telephone. This is where the city of Sammamish used to be very different than Bellevue, Kirkland, all the other places. That's why I made my home over here, and I've invested over $25 million to date just in the city of Sammamish. I would like to continue to do that, but kindly take that under advisement and see what you can do. And please pass on my compliments to your staff. They are wonderful. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Vishwas? It says open public FLL for the comment. I will come back to that one. Harry?
Harry Shedd, 2313 Sahali Drive East here in Sammamish for 38 years now. Mayor, council members, city manager, I'm first of all thankful that you made this opportunity available tonight for Councilmember Treen and didn't vote and cut it short several weeks ago. I'm surprised by the matter concerning Councilmember Treen this evening. I've never seen it in the 24 years of the city, and I know you have a lot of hot issues on your agenda. I question whether this should be one of them. I've known him to be a different person than has been said of him recently. I've known him for years and have enjoyed the interface with him. He's been above reproach with me at all times on any matter. I've seen him in honest, forthright, and serving others ways. We'll hear a lot more evidence tonight than has been talked about to date, and I'm hoping that you haven't made a final decision yet, but that you'll wait until all the facts are in. It's only fair that his particular facts be known in depth and that you're there and then able to make a fair decision. It's something that will, when charged to a person, would be with them for the rest of their lives. It's not just a cursory matter that will pass, and that's not fair. Not only that, but you'd be setting a precedent that you're apt to see again and again. So I hope you'll be fair-minded, hear all the details, not have a prior decision in your mind, but be open to all the facts and then make the proper decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Jerry?
First off, I'd like to say I'm extremely disappointed that that you're asking the public to address this issue prior to having the public hearing. I think it makes no sense whatsoever to have a public hearing and then not allow the public to comment on information and evidence that they might hear. That's totally backwards. It doesn't just seem backwards, it's totally backwards. And as a citizen, I was watching the December council meeting where you rushed to judgment and deliberately entered into the record a very negative and accusatory statement condemning the action or inaction of Councilmember Treen. You're accusing him of failing to report that another person asked him to do something wrong. He didn't do it. According to your own investigation, you stated that he did not act or respond to that request. He did not delete any messages, again, according to your own report. Furthermore, you referred the failure to report a request to commit an illegal act to the sheriff's office for further investigation. That seemed like overreach, but that being said, you did it. Then at that meeting, the mayor asked City Council's legal counsel how long that investigation might take. And you got your answer. She didn't know how long it would take. It might take months, was the quote. So rather than wait for the rest of the information you might or might not receive, one council member insisted that the negative and defamatory and slanderous statement be entered into the record. For what purpose? What were you accomplishing by doing that rather than wait and learn and listen? You had no complete investigation from which to draw any conclusion. You just wanted to rush to judgment. Some of you insisted that, quote, you wanted to just get it behind us. One said, this just drags on. Well, that's not, what's the purpose of that? How is justice served by that? It's not. You know, why did you want to publicly slander Kent Treen prior to us even having a public hearing on the matter? Where the Public Meetings Act and provided training, where is there a requirement to report requests from citizens that you don't respond to or act on? You know, I'd like the City Council to consider to vote to correct the record by removing the censor from the record, table this entire issue, and get to work on things that matter. And if in the future, if you receive information from the sheriff's investigation at that time and something was wrong, then move forward at that time. You've got the cart way ahead of the horse. And I think it's absolutely not a fair process.
Thank you. Kathy?
I'm going to speak in support of Kent Treen, and I'm going to read what I wrote so I don't miss a beat. I'm Kathy Laird, 20122 Southeast 37th Street. A resident for about 10 years, former civics teacher in high school, and recently retired from Boeing where I did organization development. And I say that because it relates to my opinion about this whole matter. I'm here to completely support Councilmember Kent Treen and his attorney. I remember his election to the Sammamish City Council a few years ago, his excellent intentions for running, and his actions since then to represent myself and other Sammamish residents. I have to ask, what has happened to our Sammamish City Council these last few years? We citizens used to regularly attend City Council meetings and participatory events to involve all of us in good governance, and it's why I moved here from Seattle. Then during COVID, City Council meetings were not open. There was a new city manager. He didn't work out. But like any city issue, it's the responsibility of City Council to work through this together. Good governance has challenges. Then I heard that Christy Malchow and Karen Moran left the council. What a loss. These two are excellent council members, experienced and committed. I've supported and worked with them. Citizens did not and do not have any visibility of what is going on, and no explanations were forthcoming for those two leaving. I knew something was wrong and very dysfunctional with this council. Now there seems to be lots of contention, woke ideology, interpersonal conflict, and no acceptance of different points of view and ways of working, like what's happening now with Kent. This is all non-constructive with negative effects for Sammamish. I just conclude by saying, rather than disparage fellow council members, I want our elected representatives, all of you, to work together, appreciate what we have here in Sammamish, and including each other, and maintain our community and quality of life. That's what we're asking you to do, and plan wisely for the future. Basically good governance, not these other things we're seeing.
Thank you. Sharon?
Sharon Steinbus, 24933 Southeast 14th Street, Sammamish. I've lived on the plateau for 38 years. I'm here to speak in support of Kent Treen. I'm not aware of the details. This is the first I'm hearing them tonight, and frankly, my mind is blown. I was going to tell you about the Sammamish stewards. I'm a Sammamish steward. Kent Treen is a Sammamish steward. You will have received this email. Talks a lot about the Sammamish stewards. We do a lot for Sammamish. So this is the email. In the way of wildlife habitat, habitat restoration, removing invasive plants, planting native plants, creating wildlife habitat. I know that Kent and Karen Howe both took the wildlife habitat training, so you're wildlife habitat stewards, and Ratuja has worked at Earth Day, giving away native plants. So what I did want to say a little bit about is, I don't know if you have seen this walking tour brochure. It's with the other brochures up at the front door as you walk in. This is a list of city parks and stormwater ponds where Sammamish stewards work to restore the environment, where we have volunteer work parties. We engage the community. There was a work party this past Martin Luther King Day that had over 100 people. But in this brochure is listed the East Lake Sammamish Place wetland. And this is a wetland that Debbie and Kent Treen adopted. The city has created this Adopt a Wetland program, which is really cool. We have 5 wetland habitats in Sammamish that have been adopted, taken off the city's MO list. And Kent and Debbie Treen adopted this wetland in 1985. And I have worked elbow to elbow with Kent in the environment, planting native plants, creating wildlife habitat. I know Kent to be a good guy, and I know his heart is in the right place. I know he's passionate about the environment, and he's passionate about the direction that he thinks Sammamish should take with regard to saving the environment. I support everything everyone has said before me with regard to Kent Treen and his good character. Thank you.
Thank you. Holly?
My name is Holly Vert. I am not a Sammamish resident. I used to be a resident of Bellevue. But I wanted to speak to Kent Treen's character. I'm sorry that I'm getting a little emotional, but I've known this man for 12 years. What you're accusing him of and slandering him of is not fair. I was a police officer for 12 years myself. I actually worked up here in Sammamish on the plateau. So I might have been in some of your houses at one time or another. When you accuse somebody and you slander their name, you slander their reputation. There's an old adage about throwing tissue in the wind. You can't get it back. And if you slander his name, you can't get that back. He deserves a fair trial. He deserves a fair hearing. He deserves the protocol that you guys have established. And by not allowing that to go through, you're not allowing justice. How would any of you feel if somebody came up here right now and slandered you? There's witnesses, you can't take it back. You might take it off the record, but you can't take it back. I've known this man for 12 years. I worked side by side in the Bellevue School District with him. He is upright, he is honest. He may be abrasive and sometimes the way he delivers something, but he always speaks the truth. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else who would like to make comment that didn't get a chance to sign in? Okay, I think we're good to move to Zoom.
If you wish to provide public comment, please raise your hand. For attendees who are joining by phone, please raise your hand by pressing *9. I see we have currently 7 people that have raised their hand, and I will unmute them in the commenters in order that they have raised their hands. Ms. Dina?
Hello. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Hello, Mayor, council members, city staff. I wish what I had to say today would be heard and listened to, but I'm not confident of that at all. I'm sitting here bewildered month after month. I'm waiting for the council to do the city's business. And month after month, it's nothing but one attempt after another to game the system and process just to discredit Councilmember Treen's reputation. With his record as a council member and your lack of evidence against him, it's clear that these fishing expeditions are for a political gain by a select few in the community and on the council. All of this continued bullying is specifically because he opposes some of your views and ideas, some. I'm having a hard time seeing diversity, equity, and inclusion. Thank you.
Thank you.
I will now promote the next commenter. Cheryl?
Hi, can you hear me? Can you see me? I am Cheryl Hooper. Sorry, Sarah Hooper. Sorry. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, but you have a lot of feedback. If you could turn your volume off on your computer and just speak through your microphone.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, that's better.
Okay. I am Cheryl Hooper, and I reside at 2002 251st Place Southeast. I moved here in 1978. I am attending this meeting tonight because I learned that there is a motion to censure Kent Treen, and I am here speaking to support him. A couple years ago, I was more involved with the city government issues and attended a few meetings where I spoke, but I got to the point where I observed that talking to the council became pointless. The current council doesn't appear to care what the citizens want. It's an echo chamber for the council members to push their agendas. I gave up, and so did a lot of other people that used to join me. But here I am in defense of someone that the citizens elected. Many of you were not elected by the citizens. You got this job by knowing the right person in King County. You did not earn your positions from the citizens, and yet you are trying to sideline one of the few of the council who the citizens voted for. A few days ago, I learned that there is some far-reaching claim that Kent Treen has broken some edge case scenario, is now being wielded by y'all members who are not elected by the people, and now you want to take over. His lawyers even explain that he has done nothing wrong. Kent Treen represents us, the citizens. He does good work. If you remove him, you are stomping out the people's voice. Put your differences aside and allow this person with high integrity who really cares about this city, the citizens, and doing the right thing to be a part of this council and complete his finished work. Otherwise, this council loses all credibility and furthers the public's lack of trust in government. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll now promote the next commenter. Kevin? You're muted.
Yeah, my bad. Sorry about that. Yeah, my name is Kevin Glass. I've been a Sammamish resident for about 10 years, and I'm here to support Kent Treen. He's a gentleman who was elected by the people of Sammamish to the city council. And they made a conscious decision to select him as a voice to our community, and now that voice is at risk of being silenced. And that seems to be an issue with some rule that Ken broke that apparently you have evidence to suggest didn't really happen. His lawyer said he's done nothing wrong, and yet we're moving ahead with a censure. It would remove Kent from the council. It would remove one of the few members of our community elected to the position, and it would diminish the voice of our community. So I've got some questions. How do you serve the community when you reduce your ability to communicate with it? How do you communicate with the community when you refuse to hear from it? How do you hear what our community has to say when you work to silence it? Kent Treen is a man of integrity, an exceptional representative, and an important voice for the people of Sammamish. His presence on the council is the will of the people. He's a key contributor to the process of the city council serving our community with honor, and I think we gotta keep him on there. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I'll now promote the next commenter.
Good evening. My name is Carrie Bosworth, and I live at 20117 Northeast 39th Street, and have lived in Sammamish for 5 years. I personally have been watching City Council meetings consistently since 2020 and following this and other issues week to week. On September 20th, I made a public comment about being ethical and facing issues when they occur. My and others' expectations of anyone that received this type of text would have been to respond, report it at the time, which was August 26, 2020, include it in the city manager investigation, and have a response ready for their fellow council members and the public when it disclosed or discovered. Instead, it surfaced via PRR, and there have been no compliance with submitting detail that he's been asked for since August, September of 2020, via revised declarations in November, nor repeated requests since then. And when this was added to the agenda and discussed during executive session on November 15th, your council member, Kent Treen, simply walked out of that meeting. He did not return to the dais. It's interesting that on December 6th, how precisely Councilmember Treen read off the rules regarding when and how a public hearing should be scheduled. Referencing and following rules when it suits someone and not at other times does not make a consistent or trusted public servant. Some of you are giving Councilmember Treen the benefit of the doubt way too long. It didn't feel great watching him say that you were tarnishing, slandering, being vindictive, and bullying him when you were not involved or aware of what took place until recently. Talking to his peers this way is indeed abrasive. I hope tonight that we hear a concise and to the point explanation of what transpired when the text was received and what happened since then. I hope we don't hear repeats of "because I'm innocent" or table until an investigation is complete. Councilmember Treen has been given multiple opportunities and ample time to explain what happened. Now would be better late than never, but still, it's a huge disappointment that it wasn't dealt with properly at the time that we know of, and has taken up so much of everyone's time to bring it to closure with appropriate action now. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll now promote the next commenter. Karen? You're muted.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great. Good evening. My name is Karen Moran from Sammamish. I'm a past council member and a long-time resident. Tonight I'm back to I'm not here to give you my opinion, but rather just to give you some factual problems with what you're considering for this evening. I'm looking at and just trying to consider some of the things that I've hoped you considered regarding anything as far as looking at sanctions for Mr. Treen. The first thing is you don't have any proof that Councilmember Treen even saw such an email come onto his phone. He said he didn't see it. I believe that a person is innocent until proven otherwise. The past caller, which I'm taken aback about, she says Councilmember Treen hasn't done anything. Well, Councilmember Treen keeps saying he didn't see it. Just because you don't like the answer doesn't mean that isn't the answer. Number two, if a council member hasn't seen such an email, if a council member had seen such an email, any council member, any one of you had seen such an email, there is no rules that require him to bring it to a council. I reviewed your council rules this evening. There simply is nothing there that states if a non-solicited text should come to my personal phone or to my personal device that involves the city, that you're required to share that with the entire council. There is no such rule. It's simply not there. Number three, if you follow the MRSC's guidelines written by Ann McFarland, your rules should include the power to sanction. This is not a new idea. It has come up before. It was then suggested to have it in the council rules before it was ever needed again, and so that everyone is on the same page in that what constitutes a sanctionable offense. Without this being written, you are pulling out of your pocket what you think the rules should be. Number four, what kind of offenses should be sanctioned? Well, this is what Ann McFarland has written. Failing to offer courtesy respect using insulting or foul language, failing to observe rules of discussion, i.e. interrupting others speaking out of turn, violation confidentiality, things coming out of executive session. Well, we know that's been a problem in the past, but that wasn't Mr. Treen. Failing to observe ethics guidelines, taking action outside of the meetings that are aimed to undermine the city council. Again, that was been a problem in the past, but again, not Councilmember Treen. One warning that Ann McFarland ends with is something that I think we should pay close attention to. Sanctions should be considered when something is an ongoing problem. A serious conversation is recommended to happen first so that the action would not happen again. And then finally, sanctions should be used wisely. They should not be used to silence a minority or a minority member just because the majority disagrees or has a statement to make.
Thank you.
I advise.
I'll now promote the next commenter. I don't see, oh, there we go.
Am I on?
Yes, go ahead.
All right, former Deputy Mayor Romero Valderrama. I see that we have another episode of Malchow Gate. This episode is amnesia. Tonight you have on the agenda deliberation on censure of Treen. Yet it astounds me and community members that the agenda does not mention former council member Malchow, who was mentioned in the opening discussions of censure as having received the message originally from the city manager to delete messages. Malchow, as then mayor, had the obligation to bring this serious matter immediately to the council's attention, who could have determined at that time if education, reprimand, or disciplinary measures were needed. Instead, Malchow forgot about that message that day and appears for a year to have been amnesia-like for the matter, even after she personally called for a full investigation with 4 attorneys to look into the city manager for ethics and wrongdoing. Malchow then led a council effort to have him removed or suspended. Yet when the city manager publicly responded saying it was a witch hunt and wanted a public hearing, raising serious wrongdoings and allegations against illegal actions from then Mayor Malchow, citizens were then told there would be no public hearing, and instead the city would pay the former city manager some $400,000 with a stipulated gag order for him not to speak. Remember, the public hearing for the city manager requested was denied, and this and other serious allegations against Malchow were never heard or investigated before then Mayor Malchow suddenly submitted her resignations. Citizens were rightly outraged at the extent of this massive payout and the conditions of silence. Malchow and others then said there was no smoking gun to justify firing at no cost to the taxpayer. Yet Malchow's questionable amnesia meant that she again did not tell the council she had this message. So this allegation was so serious in this message that it was referred to law enforcement. This council then voted to pay the former city manager this grossly extravagant amount when this information was withheld from them. Malchow may say she had forgotten, but the citizens footing the bill have not forgotten of what's taken place here. And we expect the council to likewise censure Malchow for hiding this information. Censure is a formal statement of disapproval by the council majority. You may not be able to punish a past council member, but you can censure. To have Justine receive a censure at this hearing is a gross injustice. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll now promote the next commenter. Mary Wichter.
Good evening. My name is Mary Wichter, and I've lived in Sammamish for 22 years. I sent in two long research emails that I did related to two technical topics on your agenda tonight, and I wanted to speak to them briefly. I attend not only the city council meetings regularly, but also the Sammamish Water and Sewer District meetings, and I wanted to let you know that they did do their wastewater comprehensive plan. It went out for public comment, and that was available until 12/30 of last year. And in that, they had they have about almost 17,000 ERUs, which were equivalent residential units, depending on their meter size for either single or multifamily. And based off of the current zoning of the city of Sammamish, they estimate that they can have up to almost 28,000 ERUs. So if you just mathematically note that, you can see that there's about 11,100 ERUs which are available for growth. So I just wanted to give that information because there aren't restrictions with regard to sewer or water. Also, Northeast Sammamish Sewer and Water District has not been growing because they are pretty well set. They don't have hardly any septics, and they have not seen a lot of growth because of the building that they're at with the current capacity and zoning. We also have about 3,300 septics in the city of Sammamish. Those people are on, a lot of them old, very old, failing or pre-failing septics. So it's important that the city of Sammamish try to get sewer to those areas by working closely with Sammamish Plateau Water and Sewer District, and also with King County Environmental Health Services. And then since we're talking about land use tonight and the future land use map, I sent in two examples. One is from Bozeman, Montana, where I grew up. My family moved there in 1964 and still owns property. And it shows you what they call it, the flume for future land use map, what it looks like in colors and what it means, and the zoning that would correlate with it. The second example is from Redmond, Washington, because David Pyle, some of his staff a couple years ago had used actually Redmond as an example for why and how we should change our map so that you get some broader area swaths and then you have specific zoning. So I was able to look those up on the website today for Redmond, and I shared those in emails. So hopefully you guys will be able to look at that and they'll be useful to staff. And then the second email I sent was just a lot of information for the critical areas ordinance. The first thing I wanted to say is I believe the shoreline is not included, but if you have seismic along there, how are you handling that for geohazards? And then I gave a lot of information on wildlife maps and other things that are available. So that's about my 3 minutes for tonight, but I hope that you'll have a good meeting on this, and I'm looking forward to getting these topics moving forward after all these years.
Thank you.
I'll now promote the next commenter. Stephanie Rudad.
Hi, everyone. I'm calling in with regard to the public hearing regarding Council Member Kent Treen. When Council chose to make their mark on the diversity, equity, inclusion policy, you added the word belonging to it. Diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. In order to ensure democratic equality, electeds need to still listen to the voices of those they don't like. You need to demonstrate belonging, not just listen and dismiss, actually uptake what's being shared from people with opposing viewpoints. Uptake ensures that all of our voices are given a fair hearing, that all voices are duly evaluated in the decision-making progress. That's why public hearings are also crucial. My belief in upholding democratic process is why I'm even bothering to share public comment with you, Council, despite you having not ever extended the same respect to me. Having watched this Council's discussion on the topic, I've noticed some Council members acting with malice, giggling when taking action to harm Council Member Treen. It's highly unprofessional, especially in a quasi-judicial hearing that's not even following public hearing protocols. Further, this behavior and related actions undermine the democratic behavior expected of electeds, especially under the topic of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Still, this hearing is a chance for all of you to have a paradigm shift and take this role as electeds with greater seriousness, as you represent every single one of us, not just yourselves. I expect my council to play by the same rules. This isn't happening. There are continued recent violations of the Sammamish Code of Council rules and OPMA. One could call it a mistake when it happens, when it's uncommon, and claim to be unintentional. But when there are two sets of rules, I dissent. We all know that going after a council member over a 3-year-old text you don't even know the context of, but have invested a lot of energy in making assumptions about, is an act to castrate them as a policymaker. Finally, establishing guilt without absolute proof isn't how our legal system is intended to work. I certainly do not expect that to fly even in a quasi-judicial forum, especially when the public is not welcome to comment in response to the hearing. Failing to apply the rules and the code uniformly, it makes it very clear that the council is choosing procedurally, symbolically, and an otherwise undemocratic path. There's no better time than now to turn that around. Embrace the democratic process. It's bad for democracy when we don't embrace it. Please consider removing this from the agenda entirely. Thank you.
I'll now promote the next commenter. Paula?
Good evening, City Council. My name is Paula Harper Christensen, Sammamish resident for 36 years. And by the way, I loved hearing from the children tonight. Thank you. The City Council meetings are a critical listening component to the needs and wants of our community. It is how our elected representatives build trust with the residents who live and work here. Each evening, as you discuss safety issues for the old and the young, we build a symbiotic professional relationship striving for the same goal of well-being. You were elected to represent the people, and I thank you. We, the adults, parents, council members, teachers, community leaders, are obliged to teach the children well. We are responsible for modeling the behavior we expect from the children and the students in our schools. Ideally, we represent the acceptance of others and live within our ethical standards to tell the truth and to obey our laws. As a lifelong teacher and advocate for children, at the foundation of what we teach is to do what we know is right. It is right to respect others, to tell the truth, to live with integrity, because when we are honest in sharing, we create safety. Trust is at the core of my comment tonight. Sitting Council Member Treen has yet to release public records after numerous requests from the city. He seems to be stonewalling. If he speaks the truth, why is he not releasing the public records? Such secrecy creates an environment with the potential for lack of accountability and abuse of power. When information about the local government operates, of how local government operates, it's forthcoming, it causes the public to be skeptical. Because of Councilmember Treen's failure to act, it is my opinion that the council should move to approve the censure and removal from any committees where he serves. The people must trust the government to do the job for which it exists, or all else is lost. Best practices for good governance is through transparency, followed by accountability when best practices are not demonstrated. We cannot allow the new normal to violate the oath of office or to look away when violations when there are violations in our city. Be well, council, gratitude for the work that you do.
Thank you.
I will now promote the next commenter.
Good evening, City Council. Paul Stickney, Sammamish. I did not intend to actually speak tonight. I sent in some emails on fax, and after hearing everything tonight, I thought I would add just a couple things to the record. Many good comments from both sides. I'm a person who really strives to understand all sides of issues. There are, in a lot of cases, more than two sides to the equation. I've known Kent a long time. We don't see eye to eye on some things, but we do see eye to eye on many things. My partner in Sammamish, who passed away about 5 years ago, Dick Berg, he worked for Jack Benaroya. And Jack taught him something that he shared with me. It's not who's right, it's what's right. And I'm going to look at something that doesn't have to do with Kent Treen being involved in this situation, but more talk about what's right. On the affidavit that is turned in response to a public record request, the person signing that, council member or whomever, they declare under penalty of, perjury, that the foregoing is true and correct. There's also a choice on the affidavit that in this case was chosen. I have not searched my personal devices and accounts, as I do not use any of my personal devices or accounts for city business. The troubling aspect that I have from a what's right perspective is in this case, that was a false statement. Several PRRs provided, which I turned in, many WhatsApp chats, which are personal and encrypted, also texts to Councilmember Treen's private phone, which I turned in today, as well as use of a different email than I'd ever seen before. And I'm sure there's more than one side to the story to the email, but the key is the city asked for private channel device records that were dealing with city business to be turned in. None of those were turned in. Through PRRs, I found some of those things and submitted them today as hard evidence. So that's another dimension to this equation that should be considered. And thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else that would like to give public comment? Please raise your hand. I don't see anything, no other hands raised. Back to you, Mayor.
Thank you so much, Lita. Okay, so next we have our consent calendar. I will entertain a motion to approve the consent.
I move we approve the consent calendar.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion on that? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, so consent passes. Next, we have our presentations and proclamations. So first, we have Black History Month. I think that's Councilmember Ndupure.
Thank you, Mayor. This is the proclamation for declaring February as a Black History Month. The City of Sammamish remains committed to honoring diversity, equity, inclusion, and mutual respect as the fundamental principles of Black History Month and the core values of our community. And whereas Black History Week was initiated February 12th, 1926, to highlight the contributions and accomplishments made by the Black community that had been omitted from history, and whereas in 1976, as part of the nation's bicentennial, Black History Week was expanded and established as Black History Month. And whereas the City of Sammamish is proud to honor the history, contributions, and achievements of the Black history community locally, nationally, and globally. And whereas the contribution and presence of the Black community is recognized as enhancing the quality of life in the City of Sammamish. And whereas Black History Month calls our community to take a pause to reflect on the past injustices inflicted on the Black community and to pay tribute to the battles fought in the name of equality. And whereas Black History Month calls our community's attention to modern-day racism, biases, and prejudice that negatively impact the livelihood of Black community. And whereas Black History Month is a time for our community to look into the future to ensure inclusiveness and equality for all. And whereas the national theme for Black History Month in 2023 is Black Resistance, explores how African Americans have resisted historic and ongoing oppression in all forms, especially the racial terrorism of lynching, racial pogroms, and police killings since the nation's earliest days. Whereas the City of Sammamish will declare the month of February to offering Black history informational resources on the city's diversity, equity, and inclusion webpage. And now, therefore, it be resolved that the mayor declares on behalf of the City Council February 2023 as Black History Month.
So much. Next, we have the National Holocaust Remembrance Day. Councilmember Stewart.
Proclamation for Holocaust Remembrance Day, January 27, 2023.
Whereas on January 27, 2023, the State of Israel and Jewish people around the world will commemorate Yom HaShoah, the Holocaust Remembrance Day. Whereas we must never forget the horrific events of the Holocaust, and we must teach them to our children, and never forget the 6 million Jews who were ethnically cleansed by Nazi Germany between 1933 and 1945. Whereas anti-Semitism is an evil that threatens not only those who subscribe to the Jewish faith, but all people, no matter creed or background. It is a challenge to the core values that bind Americans together. And whereas, excuse me, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance working definition of anti-Semitism is a certain perception of Jews, which may be expressed as hatred towards Jews. Rhetorical and physical manifestations of anti-Semitism are directed towards Jewish and non-Jewish individuals and or their property, toward Jewish community institutions and religious facilities. And whereas FBI statistics for 2020 have shown that Jews are the target of 58% of all religiously motivated hate crimes in the U.S., despite constituting a mere 2% of the population. A recent American Jewish Committee survey on anti-Semitism in America found that 1 in 4 American Jews has been the target of anti-Semitism over the past 12 months, either verbal or physical attacks, in person, online, or on social media. 4 in 10 American Jews, 39%, changed their behavior over the past year out of fear of anti-Semitism. And whereas state officials and institutions can play a powerful role in promoting values of tolerance and pluralism and in protecting citizens from acts of hate and bigotry motivated by discriminatory animus, including anti-Semitism. Now and therefore, Mayor Kaylee Clark, on behalf of the Sammamish City Council, hereby proclaims January 27, 2023 as International Holocaust Remembrance Day in the city of Sammamish, and recommit us to the promise that never again can such a tragedy occur by remembering the victims of the Holocaust and teaching our children about this tragedy.
Thank you. Okay, so next, under unfinished business, we have the proposed censure resolution for failing to report a request to violate the Public Records Act under RCW 42.56. As some will remember, during the council's December 6th regular meeting, Councilmember Treen requested more time to prepare. For the proposed censure resolution, the council voted to set the proposed resolution and public hearing to today, 17 January, on our regular meeting agenda. This item is now before us. The public has provided an opportunity to comment on the item, and comments have been received in writing during the public comment portion of tonight's meeting. Now is the opportunity for Councilmember Treen and or his legal representation to address the council and provide any information you, the council, to consider regarding the proposed censure resolution. Following that, any member of the council may make a motion to approve the resolution, and if it receives a second, then the council will deliberate from there. So, Councilmember Treen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First, I'd like to just thank the public for coming out and speaking. Appreciate the support, and there are answers to those who have accused me wrongly. At this time, I'd like to introduce my attorney for some remarks. Actually, I'll have him introduce himself if that's all right.
Right, thank you.
Thanks.
My name's Paul Lawrence. I'm with Pacifica Law Group. I've been practicing law for 39 years in the state of Washington, and the majority of our work that we do is for cities, counties, and other public entities, including a lot of work in the area of ethics. I think it's sort of first, I'd just like to note, there have been some suggestions in the public comments that perhaps there's some prejudgment among any members of the council, and I would suggest that if that is the case, I would ask that those members recuse themselves from voting on this resolution. So I'm here, Mayor and Council, to speak with regard to the proposed resolution. The proposed resolution is not appropriate. It is not justified by the facts or the law. It does not comport with Robert's Rules of Order, which this council follows, and it does not comport with the general practice of other local government entities when they address issues of ethics that are raised with respect to their members. I think as a preliminary matter, we must sort of identify what's going on, what is at issue here. There is no allegation of violation by Councilmember Treen of the Public Records Act, because in fact there is no violation by any of the actions, even if you believe the allegations in the resolution. There is no violation of any training provision with regard to the Public Records Act. I think there's a reference to training. Yes, he took training, but there's nothing in the training materials that he was provided or that are provided by the State of Washington Attorney General's Office that speak to any obligation that was violated by Commissioner Treen. There is a state law that involves the ethics that are applied to city council members like yourselves. And there's been no allegation and no actual violation of any of those rules of ethics that are set forth by the state that are applied to all of you. Now, what the city has claimed is violated is a goal that was adopted in 2022, years after the alleged violation here occurred. Those rules obviously cannot apply retroactively, so there's no basis to even think they might apply to Councilmember Treen's. But in the resolution that you adopted, adopting those goals for the city, you said what those goals were going to be used for. Quote, to help inform development of the 2023 budget and subsequent work plan, as well as assist in the city's council work of the 2024 Comprehensive Plan Update and other citywide planning documents, close quote. There's nothing in there that says that these rules are being adopted to set a standard of conduct for council members. And I think doing so would be an extraordinary and a bad precedent. I would ask that you review those goals and ask yourself, are these goals that you are binding yourselves to follow? And if you don't follow them, then are you going to censor each other every time you don't follow them? Are you going to censor each other every time that you have failed to maintain a high level of public safety? That's your safety goal. Are you going to censor yourself every time there's a failure to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging? That's your DEIB goal. Are you going to censor yourself every time you fail to facilitate housing alternatives that meet a diverse range of incomes and needs? That's your housing goal. The point is, these have nothing to do with standards of conduct, and they have no application to the matters at issue here. Let's turn to the facts. There is no factual support for the finding that Council Member Kent Treen knowingly failed to report the text. As he has stated, he has no memory of ever receiving the text. He has stated that he did not knowingly fail to report the text, yet that is the basis of the sanction. None of you have any personal knowledge about that. So again, what is the facts here that support that finding by the City Council? They don't exist. There's also no factual support for the assertion that the failure to report damaged the city's reputation. That's a conclusion, but there's no facts here to demonstrate that. What you have heard instead in most of the testimony earlier was of the good works, the good nature, and the good benefits that Councilmember Trent has brought to the council. And I think the comments were, at least 7 or 8 to 1 in favor of Councilmember Trent. So in terms of the facts here, the only facts that you actually have are Councilmember Treen's statements. You have no other facts. Now, you did refer this matter to the sheriff, as I understand it, and the sheriff is an entity that is, I understand, performing an independent investigation here, and as a result of their investigation, independently ascertaining the facts at issue, they find a problem then you're going to be in an entirely different situation. And maybe then there might be a basis to act, but certainly there is none factually now. Let me turn to Robert's Rules of Orders, which this council has adopted to guide its procedures. While it is accurate that the Robert's Rules of Order do allow a simple motion of censure, they do not allow in that same proceeding any sanction. Yet this resolution purports to sanction Councilmember Treen by removing him from committees. Robert's rules are very clear that where there is a sanction involved, there has to be a formal proceeding with an independent investigation and a formal hearing with witnesses before this council. And the Robert's rules emphasizes that because the alleged act here did not occur during a meeting, that this is critical because none of you, as I said before, have any personal knowledge of the issue here. Now, putting aside the violation of that, I think it's important to recognize that another thing that Robert Rules of Order states. It is usually in the best interest of the organization to obtain a satisfactory solution of the matter quietly and informally. I think you heard Karen Moran talk about what the MRSC says about this, and I don't know if you're familiar with that organization, but you should be. It's the Municipal Research and Service Center. It is an excellent source of information that is provided to all cities, counties of the state. And as Ms. Moran pointed out, based in an article that they published by an expert parliamentarian, the issues of censure and sanction are things that really are only applicable to repeated violations of an ethical standard. They are things to be avoided. What I have seen in the practice of other public entities is that if there's an issue like this involves, it is addressed by education and discussion, not by censure and sanction. So I think that Councilmember Treen, if you want to make any factual statements to support your position, this might be an appropriate time to do so.
Thank you. In respect to the issue at hand of failure to report or receiving an email or a text message on my city phone, I do not recall receiving the text. I did not knowingly fail to report the text, and I did not knowingly delete any city documents, and certainly not in response to this text.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So in conclusion, as a matter of law, as a matter of facts, as a matter of this council's own rules of procedures set forth in Robert's Rules, there's no basis for this council to act on, let alone pass this resolution. And I urge you to follow the law, to follow the facts, and follow your own rules and reject this resolution. I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
All right, Council. Thank you, Mr. Lawrence and
Thank you.
Councilmember Treen. So next, I will accept a motion on the resolution. If it does receive a second, at that point, we can have questions and discussion.
I motion to censure Councilmember Treen and to have him removed from his external committees.
I second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
I'll speak to my motion.
Okay.
I appreciate all the comments that we got from residents earlier today. Accountability matters. The conduct of Councilmember Treen violates the trust our residents have that council is conducting city business in an ethical manner. He still has not signed the declaration that he has searched his personal devices and accounts, and provided records related to city business. I'll just say that again. He still has not signed that declaration. Councilmember Treen, by not reporting the request by the former city manager to delete public records, which is against the law, council had no choice but to provide a severance package of $380,000. Ethics matters and accountability matters. Thank you.
Councilmember Howe?
Well, this sucks. I don't want to be in this position. I know you don't want to be either. To speak about, just to try to separate things a bit, I think Kent is an honorable man who does good work and does different opinion from myself. I think he brings an important voice to the council and an equanimity, which I appreciate. And so this isn't why we're talking about it. This isn't personal, and this isn't about the kind of person he is. It's because he was asked to provide a public record. He said he couldn't find it. This was 6 months ago. If you can't find it, take your phone, hand it to IT, and say, find it. You got the record because we have the public evidence that shows it exists. So we know it exists. We know it hasn't been deleted. So just give your phone over to IT. He's had 6 months. 6 months to work through this differently. If I'd heard any contrition, if I'd heard, you know what, darn it, I probably did get it, I screwed up, I shouldn't have done that, anything like that, I heard nothing like that. What I heard instead was, I'm innocent. But this isn't an innocent thing. This is binary. You either turn it in or you didn't. It's on or off. It is black or white. There isn't any gray matter here. So this is where I struggle. I'm, very disappointed and very sad about this whole process, and I know you're not happy either. But I support the motion. If I were to add a component to it, it would be, I'd like to provide a path for Kent Treen to work his way back onto different committees.
Councilmember Treen?
I will tread lightly. First and foremost, the IT department has searched my phone. Okay, so I think with there's a reference to that there's some information that might be on one of my private phones, and it was provided by Paul Stickney. If you would read the one, I don't know where he got that, okay? Because that was a private conversation about campaigning, which, according to the law, requires us to keep it separated. I cannot use the city devices, a city phone or a city computer or printing or paper to run a campaign, do campaigning. And so in that way, those text messages that are on WhatsApp was strategies on how to run a campaign. If you read through them, there's clear evidence that that was not about city business. Now, are we fully aware as council members and the public that whenever someone's going to run a campaign, there's public issues that are involved? City business. How about development? How about stormwater? How about infrastructure? How about wildlife corridors? Do you want comp plan amendments, design standards? I could go on and on. So we were looking at strategies, and so if I would have used the city phone for campaign information with other people I was working with on the campaign trail, then I would be in violation. So actually, Paul Stickney's evidence actually supports my innocence. It's evidence that shows that I am playing by the rule and that I am keeping stuff separate, that was city business and this is campaigning. Amy Lamb, you're not telling the truth.
Councilmember Stewart?
Yeah. Democracy dies in darkness. We've all heard it, and we all likely believe it. And the question is, are we willing to do something about it? I did hear all of the comments from people, and there were a number of issues that were raised. One is we shouldn't take any action unless this is an ongoing problem. Well, there is a clause in the resolution, whereas Councilmember Treen has been asked to conduct a search of his personal devices and accounts and produce all records from those personal devices and accounts related to city business, and to complete a declaration documenting the extent and results of his search. And to date, Councilmember Treen has not complied with that request. There's a lot of information. There were also some comments about good governance, and there's a lot of information out there about governance. The relationship between public officials and the public has been described by scholars as fiduciary in nature. And a fiduciary is a person with whom property or power is entrusted for the benefit of another. Turning to present-day government, the fiduciary responsibilities include the duty of care, which requires the public official to follow the rules and uphold the Constitution and laws of the jurisdiction. The duty of loyalty, which requires an absolute obligation to put the public's interest before their own. Prohibited benefits can include personal benefits to family members or close associates. When general ethical duties to family or friends conflict with duties to the public duty must prevail. Duties of impartiality, right? This is not about a person, but the fact that all the rules, the laws, and the ethics must be upheld equally, consistently. There's the duty of accountability. Without a duty of accountability, the public's ability to monitor the behavior of public fiduciaries would be severely limited. From the duty of accountability flow the duty of transparency and the concepts of disclosure, open meetings, and accessibility to public records. The court opined that implicit in the democratic process is the notion that government should be accountable for its actions. In order to verify accountability, individuals must have access to government files. Such access permits checks against the arbitrary exercise of official power and secrecy in the political process. And the final duty is the duty to maintain the public trust in government. I think that one speaks for itself. Without public trust, government doesn't work. Former President Obama said, if the people cannot trust their government, all else is lost. And Councilmember Treen, I'm sorry to report, but in the public records that have been turned over by other council members, there are clear conversations that are not related to campaigning, but where you compliment former Councilmember Malchow on running a great meeting last night and go on to discuss matters from that meeting and matters for future meetings. And there are many, many, many such conversations. So unfortunately, we know that there are conversations that you hosted on personal accounts and devices that you have not turned over, and we don't know what else is out there. And I think that's really important. I think the big question for me that remains out there, the big elephant in the room from the text message from former City Manager Dave Rudat, where he says to delete conversations that were had amongst the council members, staff, attorneys, and other members of the community because public records have been requested, and to delete those. My question is, what is it that you were hiding? And it explicitly says to delete them from your personal accounts and devices because they're coming after those. So while we have no evidence that anything was deleted from your city phone, you have not shared with us any of your personal conversations. And we, as a council, have an obligation first and foremost to protect the city and the residents of our city. And in order to protect the city and to protect ourselves from any kind of further action, we have to do everything in our power to make sure that we every single one of us is complying with the OPMA and the Public Records Act and behaving in an ethical way. And when people don't comply with that, there have to be consequences. Otherwise, the rules have no meaning. Thank you.
Councilmember O'Farrell.
I wanted to see if I could propose a friendly amendment. that we would move forward with the motion of failing to report a request to violate the Public Records Act, and that we would allow Councilmember Treen to retain his position on his committees.
I'll second that. All right, it's been moved and seconded. I believe it was a formal motion to keep the censure, but to allow the boards and commission representation. Would you like to speak to that motion or any other discussion?
No, I just wanted to put it out there. I'm in agreement with what a lot of people said, but I also am trying to find some kind of a compromise, because we are a council member of 7, and I want us all to continue to work together, and I think we have been working very well together. So I'm just trying to find some middle ground. So I would like to see if we have some.
And so I don't mess this up, do we vote just on the amendment or as the resolution with the amendment? Yes, Mayor. I have a question. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, if I may clarify, Council first does need to take action on the amendment that's on the floor, and then also I just wanted to point out that that pertains to Section 4 of the resolution.
If I heard the motion correctly, it was to remove that section.
Yes, is that the section where Councilmember Treen would not be allowed to retain his seats on his committees? Is that what you're referring to?
Yes, Section 4 pertains to the committee assignments.
Yes, so I'm saying that we would remove that.
And I believe Councilmember Howe, I know you didn't make a formal motion, but go ahead.
Mine would be an additional, actually, it wouldn't be necessary, but I did have a question that I wanted to ask our attorney quickly. And it has to do with the investigation by the police. My understanding is that that is only to Dave Rudat. Is that not correct?
That is correct. I have heard comment tonight that the investigation was centered on Councilmember Treen. That's not my understanding. My understanding it's about Dave Rudat and the text message that he sent. Of course, there's probably some connection, but you're correct that it's really focused on Dave Rudat.
Okay, so I think waiting for an investigation that has nothing to do potentially with Councilmember Treen isn't really relevant.
Okay, so I don't see any other hands. So first we'll vote on the amendment. I do have some things to say, but perhaps after that amendment voting. So all those in favor to strike Section 4 from the resolution, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Okay, I'm gonna have to take a count. Is that 3? Or who was the aye, if you could raise your hand? Okay, so 4, and then so striking Section 4 did win the vote, 4-3. So we do still have the resolution on the table to censure. I don't see any hands. I did want to speak for a moment. I think to a lot of everyone's point, one text does not equal everything that's in this resolution. I also don't think that it was the but-for cause for the city manager receiving that much money. I don't know what would have happened if we would have known about this. It also was a different council at the time. I believe we only had 6 of us, and there were a few different members. I'm really struggling with this because from an external point of view, it's really rough, and it does suck, like Councilmember Howe said. This is really unfortunate. It's disappointing. I also think the sentiments that Councilmember Howe said, that if anything would have been done in the last few months to at least have a conversation, or even responding to our city attorney's emails, or signing a new declaration, I think it would have been extremely helpful, at least to have a conversation first before getting to this point of seriousness. And that's really all I have. Councilmember Stewart?
I want to understand how we'll make sure that, well, I guess it's a question for after. I just think when there are no consequences to breaking the rules, there's really no point in having the rules.
Councilmember Ndapure, I don't see your hand up. Would you like to speak to anything before we vote on the resolution?
I think, first of all, thank you to the public for your comments tonight, online and in person as well. I think that is really important, and participating in this democracy is really, really important. As Councilmember Howe said, it is very vital to have Councilmember Treen on our council. I have worked with him side by side on Earth Day. I have invited him to my workplace to speak. I highly respect him for working with people who've had kidney transplants. And honestly, I think he's the one who teaches me to hold oneself up to the highest standards. And I know if he were in my position, he would do the same, hold me very much accountable for what I say and what I do. I truly respect that. So I think when, we are supposed to follow the law, we are supposed to be very transparent and, make truthful statements. So when that does not happen, I think it just needs to be acknowledged. And I think transparency and accountability are very important. So thank you.
Thank you so much. So last, what we have to do is to vote on the proposed censure resolution as amended. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
All right, so by 6-1, that resolution as amended has passed. I would like to offer a break, if possible. I'm hoping, I know we're waiting for David to come on.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. David has asked that we have a little bit of time. He needs to bring in some equipment for his presentation. So if we could
like
have at least
8:30 or like 8:25?
Either one is fine.
Okay. 8:25. Council will be back. Thank you. All right, thank you. So next up, we have new business. We have a presentation on land use and future land use map as it relates to the 2024 comprehensive plan update. I will pass it off to David Pyle.
Great, thank you, Mayor. I believe I'm being promoted, and as well as our consultant and one of our staff, so just bear with me for a moment while we make that transition. There's Jeff Arango. Evan Fisher, if he's there. Yeah. All right, thank you for your patience. We're all set up here. Good evening, Mayor, Council, David Pyle, Department of Community Development. Tonight we have a presentation related to two very important and challenging topics, the land use and housing in the city of Sammamish. I'm joined tonight by Evan Fisher, the city's Comprehensive Plan Update Project Manager, and Jeff Arango of Framework, who serves as the lead consultant on the Comprehensive Plan Update project. Before I begin, I wanted to take a moment to recognize that the published agenda bill in support of this agenda item this evening is packed full of information. And for those listening, it would be educational to read through the agenda bill to help build background on this topic, as it's one we're going to be talking about for the next 2 years. As for tonight's agenda, to help with the conversation, we have tried our best to break down the presentation into a logical sequence, starting with a brief framing and ultimately ending up in conversation with the council. Housing, land use, and transportation are complex and intertwined topics that each present their own constraints, challenges, and opportunities. Tonight, we intend to explore some of those opportunities while we also review the requirements that must be met with the Comprehensive Plan Update. Keep in mind, these are not easy questions to answer, and we will be discussing these topics for months to come. We don't anticipate solving this challenge this evening. Rather, we are working on refining the direction to take. The challenge being, how do we align our housing, land use, and transportation policies to address regional challenges and respond to changes in state law? Here we have listed some relevant past meetings with the council and the commission to help track how we got to this point. For those watching, it may be of interest to look up some of these meetings, watch the videos, or read through the agenda bills to help build background. There's been quite a bit of work on these topics in the past that have led up to this point. Attached to this evening's agenda bill are historic city zoning maps. As you can see, land use patterns in Sammamish have been largely static, and aside from single-family infill and the addition of the town center, not much has changed. For reference, this is a list of the city's current zoning designations. Although not shown on this slide, it is worth noting that the City of Sammamish Future's land use map identically matches the city's zoning map. That results in what we call flat banked capacity. You all have heard conversations about missing middle and affordable housing. It is worth noting that the city does have several codified allowances for missing middle and does have incentives for housing that meets specific requirements. Here we have a list. Density calculation rounding that requires an affordable duplex. In this instance, it's when you're doing the density calculation for, say, a subdivision to see how many units you can accommodate. If it comes up above a 0.5, and you want to take advantage of that additional unit, you have to build an affordable duplex that meets 80% AMI requirements and has a covenant on the buildings that are built. There is allowance for townhomes in the R4 and R8 zones. These are missing middle housing types. For some reason, we haven't seen these be built. We've asked builders about why they don't build them, and they say that they are not profitable and they're not in the market that they're targeting. We do have incentive for 80% AMI duplexes and corner duplexes that double density. In that case, if you were to build a duplex that meets 80% AMI, it counts as one unit. If you were to build a duplex as missing middle housing on a corner lot, that would count as one unit. Again, these are not units those have been in our code for quite a long time, as long as I've been here. I've not seen those built. I'm not sure why. They are something that's an opportunity for builders to build and intermix into subdivisions. So again, I think it's mostly because builders are targeting a certain housing type and it's not within the type of market that they're interested in pursuing. We do have residential density incentives that allow incremental density up to 200 of base density. We have an entire section in our code devoted to this. Again, we don't see builders pursue this. I think we've had one subdivision, or short subdivision applicant, I think it was Larry Farmer, who pursued this on a project down on the south end of 228th some number of years ago. We do have town center inclusionary zoning. This is the one that we see applied. And there have been some successful projects, and we continue to work with the property owners in town center on applying those. That's where I think there's a lot of opportunity to look at how that works and how we might be able to enhance that both for the builder, the property owner, and for the city. Based on a combination of data points and staff assessment, is that the city's zone capacity is 3,158 units. The basis for this is explained in more detail in this evening's agenda bill. It's important to note that the first two numbers, the R zones and the non-town center commercial, come out of the buildable lands assessment without application of market factor. The third number, the 1,284 units, comes as the balance of what could be built in the town center under the 2,000 unit cap that's imposed under the environmental impact statement that was done. You might hear other numbers, such as the ERUs that are available, as was made by public comment this evening. Those are based on a different model of generating capacity. They do not account for many of the things that are subtracted as a result of the urban growth capacity study that was directed in accordance with the guidance provided by King County. This is a map showing approximate areas where there is capacity available. Keep in mind the numbers shown here won't necessarily match the numbers shown on the previous slide. That is due to the difference in data point used. Rather, this graphic is intended to be a didactic guide as to where capacity is estimated to be. You can see the capacity is not all in one place. It's spread around the city. In some cases, a few units here, a few units there. In some cases, more clustered. Sammamish land use is not complicated, and as previously shown, not much has changed since incorporation. Our dominant land use is single-family residential with limited multifamily, commercial, and office, and generally these uses are standalone and are not intermixed. Now, moving into the context of the comprehensive plan update, the passing of HB 1220 set in motion a series of steps that ultimately result in the city being assigned housing affordability targets that must be accounted for with the comprehensive plan update. Among other things, HB 1220 requires cities take active steps to remove barriers to development of affordable housing. This slide helps show how we get from HB 1220 to the affordable housing targets. For those out there watching, I think it's important to track these steps because it shows how we get from passage of state law ultimately to having to show the state how we are accounting for implementing that law through our local comprehensive plan update. You can see here it starts at House Bill 1220, moves down to the statewide projecting housing need guidance, moves down to the state issuing housing need at the county level. The county then disaggregating that need and assigning that need to cities through amendment of countywide planning policies, and then cities integrating assigned numbers into their comprehensive plans and demonstrating how they are going to be accommodating that assigned need. And then the state and county verifying adequacy of the city's provision to accommodate these housing needs numbers. Right now, we are about in the middle of this as the county has finalized their methodology. They're in the final stage of working with the Growth Management Planning Council and the Affordable Housing Committee to assign numbers by jurisdiction. Once we do formally receive those numbers, we'll begin to start to assess how to integrate those into the comprehensive plan. Commerce is the body responsible for implementing the Growth Management Act. The responsibility to plan for and accommodate housing requirements have been passed down to the local level. Commerce has issued a draft land capacity analysis guidance document that helps cities identify how to measure and document capacity for new housing development on vacant, partially used, or underutilized lands. One of the most, I think, important components of this document is direction that zoning does need to be actualized at the point of or concurrently with adoption of the comprehensive plan update. And what that means is that we can't make changes to our comprehensive plan that show that we will down the road make changes to zoning to add this capacity. We actually need to make those changes to our comprehensive plan and changes to zoning to show that it is in place and ready to use when the comprehensive plan is adopted. The draft countywide planning policy targets that we're seeing that are in front of the Growth Management Planning Council at this time include 390 emergency transitional residential units, 554 0 to 30% permanent supportive residential units, 918 0 to 30% non-supportive residential units, 408 30 to 50% restricted units, 220 50 to 80% restricted units, and 0 80 and above units. I do suggest, if you're interested in understanding the relationship between these numbers and the categories where there are units and the categories where there are 0 units listed, that you take a look at the frequently asked questions that are provided by King County through the GMPC and the Affordable Housing Committee that are linked in this evening's agenda bill. I think it's really helpful to understand how the city's growth targets and these housing targets work together. And I think the challenge here is providing for the number of units in the categories that we're being asked to take on versus the market wanting to continue to build housing in the areas where we're asked to really not take on additional growth. Some of the key themes, I think that our takeaways from all the work that we've seen happening at various levels, whether it be at the state, whether it be through the Association of Washington Cities, whether it be at the county level, also with some of the collaboration meetings we have at the city level through the King County Directors meetings, et cetera, are that we provide adequate land capacity and incentives to address permanent supportive housing and permanent housing supply at bracketed income levels, as previously identified on the prior slide. That we provide designated locations for emergency transitional housing, that we identify and remove barriers to delivery of housing supply. We have to demonstrate that by applying the guidance that Commerce has provided. It's in draft form now, but I anticipate that will be issued sometime in February. That we allow diverse housing types, that we promote and incentivize development of ADUs in missing middle, that we allow low-rise and mid-rise housing development in appropriate locations and with appropriate incentives to promote target level affordability, that we zone for housing located within reasonable walking distance of current or future transit, that we zone for housing located within reasonable walking distance of public amenities, services, and retail, that we establish minimum density by zone, and that we facilitate regional and cross-jurisdictional collaboration to deliver housing supply, such as our ARCH membership and reaffirming our ARCH membership and re-envisioning how we utilize that cross-jurisdictional tool. Some of the key challenges that we've identified are how do we address the mandates of House Bill 1220 and corresponding countywide planning policies in the comprehensive plan update? How do we build the land use capacity needed to accommodate different housing types and needs in the right location? How do we address the timing of land use capacity and infrastructure needs? One of the challenges here is that if we're expected to have the zoning actualized at the point of or concurrently with the adoption of the comprehensive plan, well, then we need to make sure that we have adequate provision for infrastructure in any of those areas where we might be changing zoning or looking to add density. That presents a challenge as well. How do we clearly show our math to demonstrate we can reasonably meet our housing targets? Keep in mind that the guidance that's in draft form from Commerce will ultimately be, as I anticipate, will ultimately be the guide that Commerce uses in evaluating whether or not our comprehensive plan meets requirements and therefore can reach the point of certification. So if following that guidance, our math does not result in the numbers that we need to be providing and we can't make it add up, then it is very likely that our plan will not be given certification by Department of Commerce. So with that, I will turn it over to Jeff Arango, who will pick up the presentation. At a point down the line, I'll probably jump back in, but for now, I'll pass it over to Jeff. Jeff?
Great, thank you, David. Appreciate that. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I would like to focus the second half of the presentation on some opportunities and some things for consideration to address the myriad of housing needs and requirements that David just went through in detail. And one of the ideas, which is something I know David has brought up previously to the council, is to create more of a distinction between the future land use map and the zoning map, which will allow more flexibility for the city to make zoning changes in the future while still maintaining consistency with the future land use map. These examples were sent in by Mary Richter. Thank you, Mary. These are for the city of Redmond, and we are currently working with the city of Redmond, so are familiar with their land use and zoning. But you'll notice that the future land use map on the left-hand side has much more generalized categories of land use. And if you look at the map on the right, there are then a number of different zoning districts that could be applied that would satisfy the future land use map designation. So this is something that we definitely should consider as part of the comprehensive plan update, which will provide more flexibility in the future for the city to create the right zoning and hopefully get the right outcomes with respect to housing. Next slide, please. Some other ideas to consider, and some of these are already present under the city code, but could be modified or expanded. The first would be to look at incentives or inclusionary zoning, which typically involves some sort of upzoning in exchange for a requirement to build affordable housing. In my experience, this can be a great tool, particularly when you're looking at affordable units that are somewhat close to market rate. As you start to look at affordable units that are, say, 50% of AMI and below, it's unlikely that a regulatory strategy alone will produce those units because there isn't enough sort of market rate housing to be able to offset that. So we have seen communities be successful sort of crafting zoning that's targeted to affordable housing providers that could deliver those types of units. And again, those could also be intermixed with market units and other types of commercial development, civic amenities, and things like that. Opportunity to increase the use of accessory dwelling units, which are permitted today, but there could be some tweaks to the code in order to incentivize those and provide more flexibility. One of the things that we did as part of the development regulations phase 2 was to create a system that sort of right-sized the homes and the parcels for single-family development. So in the future, any new lot would have sufficient space to, say, add a detached ADU. There's also an incentive in the code currently where you don't get, you aren't credited for the square footage associated with a detached accessory dwelling unit. It's sort of an additional part of the development that isn't as restricted. Another big one related to middle housing would be to incentivize redevelopment of underutilized existing development and new development to create those missing middle housing types. As David said, there are zones where this is permitted today, but it's not being developed, at least in great numbers. And some of this is not always related to the use chart and allowing it, but it's actually getting those sort of incentives right so that there is more of a financial incentive to build missing middle housing types versus single family. And so things like making sure that you have appropriate densities for missing middle and that it isn't sort of tilted towards single family development is really important and something that we could look at as part of the comprehensive plan update. Another thing that we could look at is in the town center, either increasing density or allowing taller building heights. Again, once you get over, say, 6 or 7 stories, you start to look at different types of construction. There is cross-laminated timber buildings that are starting to become more commonplace and can help to sort of bridge the gap on some of the financial feasibility. But that is another thing that we could look at as part of the comprehensive plan update. And then finally, target adding density on sites with existing impervious surface, with existing infrastructure and proximity to transit. These would be the sort of the mixed use centers or the commercial areas in their surrounding properties that we could look to redevelop as well. And these ideas are things that we can test in the land use alternatives. We're going to be coming back to the council in April to talk about land use alternatives, which would allow us to do analysis, traffic analysis, land use analysis, infrastructure analysis, and be able to come back to the community and hopefully inform the crafting of a preferred alternative. So there may be some things that we look at that we decide aren't in the best interest of Sammamish, but the land use alternatives are our opportunity to sort of consider those a little bit later in the process. Next slide. Another thing to think about is, how would we decide where we might want to make land use changes? And some of these are being considered in new legislation. But the first we wanted to highlight is sort of what we're calling transit focus, which would be within some buffer. It could be 1/8 of a mile or up to 1/2 a mile walkable distance from a transit corridor or arterials where there would be more likelihood of there being increased transit service in the future. And we have a map on the next slide that shows what that looks like. So those are the different buffers scaling out from the arterials and the existing transit routes. And so that is definitely one of the considerations we could look at in terms of where to make any land use and housing changes in the community. Next slide. Another opportunity would be to look at the existing commercial centers and again, the surrounding areas, opportunities to look at a range of buffers outside of those boundaries, but because of the limited land that is zoned for commercial and mixed-use development, they have a relative importance for providing housing and other needs within the community. Next slide, please. And so this map shows the buffers from the existing center, starting at 1/8 of a mile and going out to 1/2 of a mile. And that does include some existing areas of single-family zoning and other residential zoning that we could look at for other appropriate housing types that may help support the viability of redevelopment of these existing commercial centers. Next slide. The next scenario looks at existing public amenities focus. Should we look at residential growth, say, near public facilities like parks and schools, which can be a really important issue from both the transportation and from an infrastructure standpoint. And again, we would need to fine tune what the appropriate buffer is, but we do have a map on the next slide showing what those buffers look like from parks and from existing schools. So again, these are the types of things that we could look at and could shape alternatives for consideration by the community later on in the process. Next slide. And then lastly, we could look at utilizing incentives and TDRs, sort of expanding or modifying the existing TDR program, looking at potentially additional residential growth that could be directed to areas around existing infrastructure, current or future transit lines through TDRs and development incentives. And then should TDRs be used to protect or preserve undeveloped or underdeveloped lands that meet certain criteria and have features or attributes worth protection or preservation? So that's a question we'd be interested in hearing from the council, but is one of the primary purposes of a TDR program in terms of the sending areas, those areas which we would like to protect for future generations. Next slide, please. And with that, I'll turn it back over to David to go over a few questions we'd like to use for a discussion with the council. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. So there's a few ways we could go here. We have some questions that were loaded into the agenda bill that really just help prompt conversation. We also have some questions that were included in the previous slides that I'm really curious what your feedback is on. So we could go back to those slides and ask, have a conversation about each one of those topics. Really depends on how you want to proceed. I think it would be helpful to just go through these questions real quick. We don't need an answer on them, but just to make sure we're considering, what all the different things that we need to here. The first is what changes are needed to the city's land use map, land use categories, zoning map, and zoning controls to meet comprehensive plan update housing elements requirements described. The second is, should the comprehensive plan update project team focus land use and density considerations on forward compatibility with added transit capacity along existing arterial connecting to peripheral transit centers? And the idea there is, should we be focusing on a future backbone that exists between Marymore and Issaquah Highlands or Issaquah? And should we be looking at how to build in some additional density along those lines, additional stops that could ultimately in turn result in a higher frequency of service? In order for us to get better service, we need to show that the stops are worth it and the ridership is there. So adding density in the proper locations helps with that. It also helps with us changing rules like parking requirements and things because there is an alternative mode of transportation. There is one more slide here. Excuse me. That is, it's all around missing middle housing. Is missing middle housing appropriate for application through infill throughout Sammamish single family neighborhoods? If no, where should it go? We present that there are locations where it could go near parks and schools, adjacent to existing commercial areas that are walkable to some sort of amenity or other public facility. The last one is, where should we focus evaluating capacity and opportunity? We really are wanting to understand and get some, we're not going to solve this tonight, but we're trying to refine our approach and start to really look at some tools and areas in the city. We talked about housing strategies and tools. And really, where should those be applied? Should those be applied along a primary corridor where there is existing and could be future access to transit? Should those be provided in areas that are walkable to services and amenities? And if so, how far is the walking distance that we should be looking at? So again, going back to some of the slides that were previously presented. So I could go back to the slides if that's your preference and we could walk through those, or just happy to open it up to conversation.
I think I'll open it up first and see if, Councilmember Howe?
Can I just ask a quick general question? Because in some of the maps I thought I saw, well, such a great preamble too. So in some of the maps, I thought I saw potential for additions or annexations to Sammamish. Not in this, it was actually in the materials that we got for as pre-reading. And I'm wondering, is there land, is there opportunity to also think about additional annexation opportunities? And how does that potentially factor in? Actually, it's on 2020, that extension with the cross-lined. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's a potential annexation, or am I nuts? Don't answer that.
Yeah, so we've had a few rounds with the council about annexations over the years. I'd be happy to
and they're
provide
fun, aren't
links
they?
to those videos. And the finding that we have is that most of those areas have been built out in King County.
Okay.
Under King County standards.
Okay.
And I'd have to have finance update sort of the evaluation on that, but that it didn't make financial sense for us to annex those areas because the cost of providing service exceeded the revenue that could be gained.
That's fine. Just standing that do we need to accommodate potentially for that as we look to the future? And even that statement you made about, the rest of the area has been built out to King County standards. What would be also interesting is to know if you were to extend that map, what would that look like? Because I wonder, how much does Sammamish look like an oasis? Or how much of it does it look like the rest of the surrounding area if you took out the boundaries? That's just a question. That's not a request to add extra work. But I am curious about that. The other thing I had to do with House Bill 1220, wasn't there a population requirement before to do some of the things there?
I believe there is, but however, I also believe, I have to go back and look, that we do fit within that.
Okay.
As a city of wherever we're at now,
Where we're at, yeah.
we're well over that requirement.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Those are just my questions to start.
Councilmember Indapure.
Thank you, Mayor. I think it was on if you could go back to the current capacity slide, I think actually the previous one. Yep, this one, sorry, maybe I didn't wrote it down wrong. So I think you said, we have an incentive to allow for R4 through R8 homes, and then the first one, which I think was part of the phase 1 development guidelines, because I know I was there. You said there isn't a great, developers are not doing it. Like, what is it why is it that they are not? Is it the demand from the community? Is it that it's just not profitable for them to do? Like, why are they not making use of these incentives?
So my understanding is there are many reasons. It's financial, it's the market, it's what they're wanting to build that will help them. And their business, I'm not faulting them for that. They're there to make a profit. And that building townhomes and duplexes in Sammamish in single-family residential neighborhoods has not shown to be profitable at this point. Other cities had that similar struggle. However, I think the city of Shoreline, for example, is one where I think the comment from staff was developers finally realized that they could build and make profit off of building duplexes and fourplexes. And now they're building them all over the city because they realize that they can sell them at the price point that they want to be selling things at. That doesn't help affordability, but that does show that with some promotion, I think part of it also is we don't promote these tools. And we could do a far better job of doing that.
And with Shoreline specifically, was that because they got the light rail? Did that play any part in all of this?
So my understanding is that those unit types are allowed outside of areas where light rail is. Scott was part of that conversation years ago, so I don't know if he has anything to add on that.
Thanks, David. To answer your question, Councilmember, it was both outside and inside. Inside the light rail zones, the density is quite a bit higher in most of the areas, and so it's more outside. It was more infill development. But as David is pointing out, they are starting to go in all over the place.
So one of the helpful points here with this slide is that we have these tools in our code already, and it's not a heavy lift for us to go in and evaluate where we could make some refinements to them. And I think there's a lot of benefit to doing that and to start to see them be used more frequently in the city.
If I could add one comment on this, I think one of the things to think about is when you're talking about middle housing and you're comparing building single-family homes or the same number of units for middle housing, it's going to be really, really difficult to compete with the profitability of a single-family home. And so where we've seen communities have success is allowing more density for middle housing types than you would for a single family. And that may be something that we could look at as part of this process in order to sort of better calibrate the financial feasibility of middle housing types versus single family. So for example, if you're allowing townhomes in the R4 and you can build 4 townhomes or 4 single family homes, it's going to be very difficult to compete with the single family home model. And to David's point, there are many developers that's kind of the only housing type that they tend to build. So there's a bit of an obstacle there. But really it is largely about creating the financial incentives in order to make the middle housing types more attractive.
Councilmember Stewart?
Yeah, David, if you wouldn't mind going back to your questions. I kind of have a little, a cute little saying, if you will, carrots, sticks, and partnerships. I think we need both incentives to incentivize it. I think we need sticks to de-incentivize some of the other things. If single-family homes in certain areas is more profitable, how do we change that equation, right? I mean, let's make it not as profitable, right? Let's figure out, within our power, can we even the playing field so that developers or builders are more inclined to consider other types of housing, and then partnerships, right? How do we look at companies like Microsoft and Amazon who are putting money out there to be for borrowing at near zero interest rates to build certain types of housing, or Arch or other folks to, again, help to flip the equation. So that's part of it. When I think about, though, you made a comment about, do we want to put all the density along the corridors where we can have transit? I think we have to be really careful about that. We don't have a lot of corridors in Sammamish, so if we put all of the density along 228th, we're going to create a new set of problems. I think that's where looking at those mixed-use centers and then figuring out, as we create a, whatever we want to call it, a mobility master plan or whatever we're going to do, how do we figure out how we move people around there? And again, create those connections between those mixed-use centers and the light rail, and other, transit opportunities, right? I think looking at our town center, how do we make sure we get a transit center in the town center, right? So that we really can create potentially a hub and spoke system to make this more feasible, and then potentially have, small buses that can go around the city and move people to that transit center quickly or something like that, right? Like, how do we put those things together? So I kind of feel like just saying, oh, we're going to put all the density along 228th and 244th or something is not going to really yield what we're hoping for. So in my head, I think this idea, coupling this with a mobility master plan, and really how do we reinvigorate, and I know you're working on it, the TDR program, because I think, the more infill we have in cul-de-sacs, the harder it's going to be to deal with the transportation element, the harder it's going to be to deal with the climate element. And again, if people don't have to buy as many cars or buy cars at all, we lower their cost of living. So that is part of the equation. It isn't directly related to housing, but it's still related to how much people have to pay to live. And so I think that's going to be an important factor as well. I don't know if that really answered your questions, but I think it answered some of them.
It's very helpful in us starting to feel out where we should be focusing our attention, and just throwing out some examples that don't stick to the wall, like putting it all along the 228th corridor. We're trying to feel out where we should be going with these. I inadvertently spent a lot of time at Totem Lake over the weekend with my son, and walking around while he was doing a VR thing down there, and was looking around, and I measured it in IMAP, it's a 37-acre campus, and the Inglewood area, including the city property, happens to be right about that size. So if you think about scale and how things are built out, Jeff, our consultant, has some other great examples as well. We'd love to give you a driving tour map where you could, in your infinite free time, go take a look at some of these examples, so you get an idea of how these fit. We're really interested in looking at some models, and as Jeff said, we could start to run them through some scenarios and see how they work out, following along with some of the guidance that the state has.
Yeah. David, as a longtime Microsoft employee, I mean this with all, the biggest compliment ever, but you're such a nerd. I really appreciate that. Hanging out in Totem Lake, mapping it, measuring it, that's awesome.
Deputy Mayor Lamb.
Hi, David. I had a bunch of questions. The first one is, our growth target is 2,100. All of them are at 80% or below AMI. How do we get there? I mean, do we de-incentivize market rate housing, or how does that work if builders don't want to build market?
Yeah, that's a question that, first I go to the frequently asked questions that were published by King County. I think that's where, we've asked that question. My counterparts in other cities have asked that in regional meetings that we have.
Yeah, I think I read it, but I didn't think it really answered the question, though.
The answer they give is the growth target is the growth target. You're supposed to try to hit the target as best you can. You shouldn't be an overrun. We're not going to be redoing the growth targets. That if there's an overrun or an underrun, then there is a regional imbalance that's created. It's all along those lines. I think, if some market rate housing continued to happen, I don't see there being any real negative implication, so long as we're able to really kickstart and promote the other affordability ranges that are being targeted. That's the general gist of what I'm hearing.
Okay.
The good news is we've been through, and Jeff was consultant supporting development regulations phase 2, which changed the dynamics of single family development in the city. And we might start to see some of these tools like duplexes, middle housing, 4-packs, other things be utilized more frequently because of some of the geometry requirements, the land use constraints that single family, we don't have a lot of large square lots left. We have lots of oddball lots that you might be able to assemble together, but that are very difficult to work the geometry on to get the maximum number of units. We have some that we're working with applicants on, and I get pulled into all sorts of meetings with our frontline staff that are working on some of these. And our answer back to them is, well, have you thought about trying duplexes or a fourplex or something that is allowed by code, and you could actually get an increase in density if you do this? And we're starting to see them understand that those tools are really needed to help them deliver the housing that they want to build in the city, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Can we build, can someone come in and build a duplex on any single family, on a lot that's residential, any lot? Does it, like, I'm not clear on the whole corner thing.
So you could build a duplex on a corner and it counts as one unit.
But why on a corner? Like, why couldn't you build it in the middle of the street?
Yeah, it has to do with the entrances and how it's designed. So you could have one addressed off this corner, one addressed off that corner, or off that street, that side of the building.
But why is that? I mean, isn't that like kind of prohibitive from opening up more duplexes to be built?
Agreed. And as part of the presentation that Jeff's firm did with Development Regs Phase 2, we had some ideas to rework those rules and allow for, what do they call them, side-by-sides? Jeff, there was a term that your counterpart used, basically where you have two. You know, I go back to the college housing days where you had a house, it looked like a house, and you had two units, A and B. And we had some ideas around how to rework the duplex requirements in that manner.
Yeah, because that would be great, wouldn't it? Because that would just allow more to be built without, this regulation. Yeah.
It's a great comment. Yeah.
So we're talking a lot about future transit. Isn't that dependent on having a transportation master plan?
Mr. City Manager?
How does that work?
It's a little bit of chicken and egg, Deputy Mayor. But I will say that process is kicking off shortly. And hopefully that's why those timelines are designed to sort of line up so that we do get that information in before you all are making final decisions. However, one thing that we do know is we've already heard from King County Metro how they're going to change up service once light rail opens, what they're going to do with their service. So we already know how they've planned to reshape how they provide service. And it is down that corridor, that spine that David was talking about. So we know that is a given. And then Councilmember Stewart's point, anything beyond that we might want to do might come out of what I'm not sure what term Councilmember Stewart wants to use, mobility, levitation, whatever we want to call how we get around. But we know for sure that I'll just call it our main transit spine is going to be, 228th and then Issaquah Pine Lake Road out to the Highlands. So we know that's a given. And then anything beyond that is something that the council can talk about when you get to those points about where you might want to try to incentivize it to go. But the starting point is always what we do know is coming.
So will that eventually come together as part of a transportation master plan, aside from this housing plan?
Well, that's the goal.
Okay.
One of the challenges, and I can't say this strongly enough. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but I can't emphasize this enough that the big challenge that we're facing is in reading through the Commerce draft guidance that's out for public comment right now. In order for us to show the math, we have to show that the zoning has been actualized and is by right allowed when the comp plan is adopted. So we can't be reliant on zoning that will come down the line once we build this road or do that intersection or something. And in the case of, I've heard it raised in the case of building, say, an alternative mode of transportation across the lake. That type of study would have to be complete. It would have to be on the books, and everything would have to be in place for that to happen. So the big challenge is that everything needs to line up once that point of comprehensive plan adoption happens. Otherwise, we can't count that as part of our housing production or anticipated housing production towards certification.
Okay. Just to confirm, we can currently do mixed use on all area that's business zone, correct? That zone business?
We are allowed to build residential development in office zoned areas in community business, neighborhood business. Residential's allowed, so therefore mixed use is allowed because you could bundle in the office zone, the office with the residential, et cetera.
Okay. And just one more thing, and it would be great, since you've been working a lot with builders, to know, like, what would your list be of incentives that would work? Like, what's low-hanging fruit? And this is just something for maybe you could provide in the future. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. Great comment.
Councilmember O'Farrell.
Thank you, Mayor. David, I'm just trying to figure out the housing needs assessment that we completed. How does that influence this?
So that influences I would say the flavor of what we're building. You know, there are two fundamental buckets of housing that we need to account for. One is the targets that are assigned through disaggregation of statewide need through King County countywide planning policies. They're very specific. They're in units with affordability brackets. Doesn't say whether it has to be a home, a townhome, a duplex, an apartment, a condo. It doesn't specify. It specifies affordability ranges, right? So that then intersects with the housing needs assessment, where we start to look at the local need and how the local need ultimately could be provided. So we're starting to look at more at unit types, like what types of units are needed. And it also happens to fit and correspond with the affordability ranges, because for workforce housing, there's an affordability component to that. We're also looking at walkability, you know, as something that's identified as really important. So the answer to that is we need to basically combine the two together to ultimately end up with a housing plan, a housing chapter, a land use element, transportation element that shows how both needs are being accounted for. The state and county CPP need and the housing needs assessment local need that was identified through work with the community.
Okay. Because it seems to me like what we're talking about when you talk about walkability, transit, that type of thing, that's precisely what town centre is supposed to be, and supposed to soak up that density, which I would be in favour of, you know, continuing on that path, and let's start moving forward there. Also, you had mentioned as well adding density in our shopping areas, for want of a better word. I can't think of the correct term for it, but where we have Safeway, where we have QFC, where we have all those other, and adding density in there. And that would make perfect sense to do that, to go up in those areas where we already have that infrastructure in place. And when you mentioned about talking about a corridor along 228 and up to the Issaquah Highlands and down to Marymore. I mean, one thing I think we all kind of struggle with at times is that on 228th, not that anybody in this room built it that way, but every church, every school is already along this street, and every person in Sammamish has to come onto 228 at one time or another in order to get out of here. So I'm not sure putting a huge amount of density on that street alone would serve us well, maybe some. When I look at this, I also think about back in, it was probably 2017, 2018, when I was on Planning Commission, Jay Garrison and Eric Brooks made a presentation to City Council about kind of an alternative type of city planning. I think it went down like a lead balloon at the time, but I think there's a lot of information that could be gleaned from that plan. I think it was misinterpreted at the time, but I think there were some really great ideas in that original plan that would be worth kind of at least reviewing and seeing if there's something to be said for what was put forward on that plan. Maybe not it in its entirety, and I don't remember it entirely myself, but I think it's an idea that's probably worth going back and at least reviewing again and seeing if there's some ideas in there that we are now ready to listen to and talk about that we weren't back in 2017.
And thank you for those comments. On the last one, if I recall correctly, it was along the lines of neighborhood planning.
Yeah.
And it was looking at, what
little
amenity.
centers.
Yep, neighborhood centers, and what amenities does your neighborhood include that are within walkable range to help provide for your needs in your day-to-day needs?
Yeah.
So that we don't have to get into a car and drive,
Right.
to do a week's worth of shopping.
Right.
You could just walk to a place and, ideally, or you take a bus to another neighborhood where there's something else that's different. And
Yeah.
you could take
Yeah.
advantage of that as well.
It was really, and I take your point about Totem Lake. I've been there myself, and I thought it was a very exciting project. Jane always said things like, because I think she'd been somehow involved in the planning on the Issaquah Highlands, so she knew something about this and was a landscape architect in a former life as well. But she talked a lot about sidewalks, and that sidewalks don't always have to be straight. Sidewalks can go around trees, can go around one thing and another, so that to kind of think about the same thing but think about it differently, and just because not everything has to be drawn with a ruler. So I think we have to kind of keep those kinds of things in mind too.
Thank you.
Councilmember Trine.
You can stay on this one then. I think we should focus evaluating or studying density, right? Because we got to meet this HB 1220, right? Thank you very much. So with that in mind, study density in areas that already have services or have the potential to easily add the services. And so when I think about the transit lines, right, that's this focus here, right? So definitely do that. The one thing I would say in addition to this is, though, I get to the Highlands part, and maybe that is the first step we do and look at. But if I'm fast forwarding 20 years on this comp plan, I really think it's possible you come down Southeast 43rd to the roundabout. That puts you down there by the Costco, and I think that's 2041 or close to that, where we have the Issaquah Transit Center. And so I just wonder if it would be worth studying or evaluating that as a focus for the south end. We kind of get the north end. I think there's been some studies already done, and we probably should invest in that as well, but that's money. Okay. The second one was back to the one that has the different commercial existing, there you go, existing commercial focus here. So when I think about this, I think it's a good idea. Focus on redevelopment of the existing, I believe Council Member Roisin O'Farrell said I'm going to call it the impervious areas with approximate services. And the reason why I think that would be a good idea, at least to evaluate, to focus on this, is the impact on stormwater, right? That it's already surface that is, water's falling on it, it's moving somewhere already. So we're not adding to the cost of stormwater.
And that might actually present opportunity for retrofit to help even reduce it, whereas it's an old system that needs to be retrofitted. So there might even be opportunity for improvement. So maybe we could go one step further with that and say, strive to reduce impervious surface. That would be great.
And get the density.
And get the density.
Okay, so can you, because I'm trying to get this clear in my head. Can you go to the 2 map system of Redmond? Yeah. I just really think we need to do this. Is this something that Planning Commission is going to look at this and then bring it back to us for a recommendation? Because I look at this and just say, wait a second, if I can move quick, because right now it's so clunky to get things through the comp plan, I still don't even understand it. I've tried, okay, and I don't get it. So I'm just saying, if we want to be able to meet, say, the emergency housing piece and the frequently asked questions, and they're saying, hey, you've got to have some place zoned in your city, in your plan, to meet this criteria, then I need this, I believe that this might be a solution. Am I thinking correctly here?
No, I think it's fundamental to the future of the city and how we set this up. The challenge that I have is initially, before I had read the commerce guidance, that I had understood that we could be setting up what I call banking by setting up this type of map system where we didn't have to actually implement the zoning today, but that we could set criteria for when that zoning might actually be implemented down the line once a road was built or a sewer pump station was put in, or some factor that would change in the environment that would then allow that zoning to be implemented. But in reading the guidance, I had to refocus, and that's why I've been just wanting to make sure we're all aware of it, that we could set the map up this way, and we could still add some future bank capacity that if something happens, we then can change the zoning or increase the density or do something along those lines. But that for the purpose of the comprehensive plan and reporting out and getting certification under HB 1220, we have to actually have that in place when we adopt the plan, which makes it a little more challenging given the time frame that we're working on, because oftentimes major changes to land use structures require a lot of background work, and it's important to do that type of work. So we could still take the steps to implement this type of map. I think it's actually really important to the city to identify and distinguish between the future's land use map, the vision of what the city should look like, versus the current zoning that's on the ground today and where the city is going. It helps implement the vision of the city.
So herein lies the competition within even the plan itself, right? Because the next thing I want to say is, hey, I want to minimize the changes to the existing land use patterns. And why would I want to do that? Well, I want to leverage the existing infrastructure to reduce costs. So we're not just taxing everybody out of the place, right? Because we know it's going to get expensive even with the addition of low-income housing. We're Edmonds of the 80s, and we're not seeing the prices coming down yet. So the cost is going to go up. So how do we, good luck, Dave. So how do we balance that out? Because, you look at it and you think, okay, I want the flexibility of these two maps, but I also want to take and leverage the existing infrastructure to reduce costs, which would require us to do minimal changes to the existing land use pattern. Can I marry these two together yet?
Yeah, so I think one of the benefits of this map arrangement is that you can fine-tune zoning to help take advantage of or promote different activities or uses. So you could have a say a common R4 zone in the city. Well, you could have different versions of R4 and you could have R4 arterial corner, which would be, you could rezone the corner of that would allow for different types of uses to go in there. Maybe it's more amenable to duplexes and easier to build those, or a 4-pack or something. Jeff's seen a lot of these arrangements too, and I'm curious what his thoughts are in listening to the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I generally agree with the direction of the conversation here. I think, in the alternatives development, we'll start by creating 3 different versions of the future's land use map. And as David said, I think it's a much cleaner way and less confusing way to articulate the vision of the city. One of the things you'll notice on the City of Redmond map is they've also identified parks and open spaces on there, which can be a little bit, non-specific to particular zoning districts. So I think it will be an important first step. I think, as David said, we have to meet the capacity requirements in order to meet the targets. But to the extent that we have additional capacity above those targets, we have some more flexibility perhaps to do what David had described, which is tie future, zoning changes to other events in the city, whether that's infrastructure development or other types of services. So I think the alternatives development will really be a great opportunity to kind of reimagine what the land use map looks like in different ways. And be able to test some of those ideas and find out, what's going to work best for the community. So, unfortunately, it's extremely common for communities to have zoning and land use maps that match each other. So it is, I think, more typical than we would hope for. But this major update is the opportunity to kind of change that, give us the flexibility we need, and be able to test some of these ideas that we talked about this evening.
So my last one would be to go to, thank you. The last one is, if you go to the school map for a second, because I am a visual person here, that, because I think, yeah, this is the public schools, right? Over here, okay. So I think one of the things we should have is clear criteria to make sure that we have adequate infrastructure before development is brought online. And mainly, look at that, and I just went, oh my gosh, the schools. So if I increase the density around the schools, we know what the school capacity is already. And so my ask is that we just have clear criteria to make sure that there's adequate infrastructure before the development's brought online. And I would think it should include our schools. So.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great comment. We do have some examples of other cities where they have criteria-based decision-making. And I think that, we do in part, but I think we could do a better job of elaborating and articulating in our code what those criteria are so that applicants know what they are. But I don't see that as a barrier to our doing the math, so to speak, for commerce, for certification. I think it's more along the lines of have they accounted for all the things they need to account for before we let the permit out the door to build it. Because oftentimes there are the little things that matter a lot to the community that might be left out, and a permit we might get pressure to issue a permit when one of the items is missing if we don't have clear criteria for when a permit should be issued.
Thank you.
Councilmember Howe?
Thank you. I was kind of looking at this like a heat map. And so as we look through an equity lens, for example, I'd like to see the overlay of schools, transit, commercial centers, and parks, and just see how it plays out. Who are we helping? Who are we hurting? In terms of proximity to different amenities, if you will. So a heat map could actually kind of provide that for us. I'd also kind of wondered if we had ever tested any of the ideas for increasing the appetite for more affordable housing with a current developer like STCA, for example. Have we ever shown a list of the possible things that are carrots and said, any of these appeal to you? I mean, are these, not that that's it's a focus group of one, but I'm just curious if we've ever asked them that question and if they've had any kind of response to something like that.
We haven't had that exact conversation, although we have started to have conversations around what the future tools could be used. And that's really the housing action plan.
Right.
And some of the stakeholder interviews that were done there, and some of the work we're doing right now with regard to what housing action plan strategies or tools might be most effective. And we definitely will be working with them on those. It's a great question. As a large landholder that is primed for development and has the ability to potentially provide a large number of those units,
they're right there.
What are the tools and what other incentives can we be working with them on to help get what we need?
which, just what's even remotely interesting, because I think that's where I struggled last week, was when you were showing the laundry list of the possible things in the bucket, the wonderful thing. But to a point earlier, we don't advertise the fact that we're even remotely interested in that. To me, it is a bit of an advertising and promotional opportunity to be able to use the map that you just described of here's the potential areas where we might see some opportunity for some different priced housing options, to just know that there's even a potential market for it, mixed in with that bucket of wonderful tools that you went through last week. The other question I have has to do with that list of, and one of the options was potentially adding like another story or something like that on some of the buildings. I know how unpopular that was earlier, but I have a question. Is that something like, with, obviously you'd have some kind of mitigating circumstances, like you'd have, buffers and trees, and not, where people get stuck as they think canyon, where that, it doesn't have to be that way at all. I mean, it could even be something where, and I wonder, is that something where there's a best practice to even to put the building down lower on a hillside? It is taller, but it's lower on a hillside and appears shorter. I don't know what the right answer is there, but I do know that there had been an interest in the past in adding an extra story.
So, interestingly, I'll be attending a training on heavy timber and its success in the here in the near future. So looking at that as an alternative form of construction, I think that the challenge that we have is the state seems to be going in the opposite direction. The state's saying, hey, you need to provide all these tools and do all these things, but you need to remove all the barriers. And they see design review where we are dictating how things look and feel as a barrier.
I see.
So we need to be mindful of, we need to find the right combination of tools that aren't seen as a barrier by the state and the developer, so they'll actually build it, but that also deliver the type of development that is in the architectural style, or that allows for the right amount of or canopy and light and all those things that we want as a community. What is the balance where is that sweet spot? Because there's got to be a sweet spot where it doesn't present a barrier, but you get the right outcome. That's the hard thing to find.
Where's the dial?
Where's the dial?
Because for me, when I look at schools, the answer is go up, not out. You go up. We can't dictate that. But I wonder how much of an interlocal agreement could be made between us and the school district, between mixed use and school, so that we did have some ability to control potentially what that was. Because with schools, as you know, they do this. We have a school, it's overfull, it's closed. We have a school, too many kids, it's closed. So and it's a long sine wave, but enrollments fluctuate.
Jeff, I'm curious what your thoughts are on the dial and how to fit that all together. I know, we've had a lot of conversations about that as part of development regs phase 2 and how to get the right outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. So we work with a lot of communities and organizations on different types of design standards, design guidelines, and design review programs. And I think most often when people think of design review, they think of kind of the Seattle model, which is having a separate design review board, a lot of meetings, a lot of resubmittals, and oftentimes, frankly, tension between the applicants and the surrounding abutters. But there are other types of design review that get closer to by right development. There could be design review programs that include guidelines, which are quite a bit more flexible, but are administered at a staff level, or using outside resources such as design professionals to help review those. So that's one way. Another potential is form-based code, which we've done a few for different communities, and those are really graphically kind of rich and much more prescriptive in terms of the standards that are required. So sort of less subjectivity and not really adding a lot to the cost or time to be able to get permits. I think there are options that could start to support higher quality development without sort of running into the pitfalls that some communities have encountered with design review programs. And certainly think that's something we could explore at the policy level. In the comp plan, it was something we talked about in development regs phase 2, and we're certainly mindful of some of the challenges that have come out of design review programs that have, as David said, become obstacles to affordable housing developments. I also think, in our experience, good design doesn't necessarily have to be more expensive, just needs to be more thoughtful. Some of that comes down to site planning, some of it is architectural detailing. And there's also some trade-offs that you could potentially get in terms of better public amenities, more public open space in exchange for building heights. So it doesn't necessarily have to be done without, creating more benefits for the community. So I definitely think it's a topic we should explore. Again, I think a lot of the feasibility of these different approaches do come down to the financial incentives, something that we want to be mindful of, but definitely a lot of opportunity, I think, for the city to look to those tools to try to meet both the outcomes for housing production and for, creating a great city and experience for those that are living and working in it.
Thank you.
Councilmember Indapure.
Thank you. So is it fair to say that Washington State has the fewest number of housing units per household of any state in the country? I think that's a true statement because I got it from the point that I'm trying to make is I think it's not just a Sammamish issue, right? Like it's a Washington State issue. And it is, it is getting worse. I think it impacts our economic development as well because the less the supply is, the more people rent, and when they lose their jobs or something happens, they go into homelessness, and it really impacts the BIPOC communities the most. So I just wanted to sort of throw it out there that it's not just a Sammamish issue, it's a Washington State issue, and I think that's why, our state legislature is also trying to address that. I am curious, though, maybe, Jeff, you know this already, but, how have other states, tackled this problem, right? Like, I'm sure there are other incentives. So you don't have to answer it right now, but, I'm curious about that. My second question is to do with schools. I would really like to see some data, especially around non-single-family homes, and how much student population do those townhomes or duplexes or apartment complex generate. So I am very curious about that data and really see if, having affordable non-single family homes, how much does that contribute to the growing population in the city, for schools, sorry.
For the second one, that information, we do have that in the school district's capital facilities plans for Snoqualmie, Issaquah, and Lake Washington. We could also look at some of the others in King County because all of the cities in King County that, except Seattle district, that do their capital facilities plans for the purpose of impact fees are required to include that information around the actual student generation rates. And they're all different. So it's interesting to see, Lake Washington is very different than Issaquah in terms of the numbers. And I don't know why, but I am curious what some of the other school districts are reporting out that are not ones that we've worked with.
Right, and I think I would be really specifically, because Lake Washington covers such a large area, right? Like how many students come from, who live in townhomes or apartments, because I think that's how it's broken down in the school report. And because I intuitively think, and from past data, I remember that the numbers generated are very, very low compared to single family homes.
Yeah, I do recall conversations here in this room about that not that long ago. So yeah, great questions. Thank you.
Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, and I'm sure, David, you're already doing this, but I know, for example, Kirkland, who's also in the Lake Washington School District, they're working with the school district on some very innovative ideas around schools. And I know that, if we look to the future and we're looking at education, there may be some changes coming. Again, where not every school has to be the same, sorry, there's an odd squeaking sound. That not every school has to be exactly the same as they are today, right? Like we may have more specialized schools, right? We have, in Lake Washington, we already have choice schools and things like that. So I think it would be very interesting to find out from the school district, and as we look to building different levels of affordability in our housing, it will alter. A lot of the conversations here have been, well, multifamily in Sammamish is going to be different. Well, if we continue to build only multi-million-dollar multifamily, then yes, it will be different. But if we actually diversify our housing and we actually diversify the costs of it, we're going to start to see a more similar pattern in our multifamily as other areas have. So I think the school is an interesting question, but I know the school districts are working on it and they're looking at some innovative ideas. So again, it's a somewhat of a chicken and an egg, but we can work together with them to say, how are you solving this in places like Kirkland? What kinds of schools are you looking to build? Can we be thinking about that and planning for that here as well, right?
That's a great comment. Actually, I'll put a plug in for the futures land use map. That one of the benefits of a futures land use map is you can identify areas for schools, and you can set a land use designation as school and a corresponding zoning as school. We've had some challenges with permitting. We have if you talk to Issaquah, they'll say we have a much streamlined permit process as compared to the city of Issaquah, the Issaquah School District, that is. For permitting schools, just because of the recent experience they've had with the high-low campus. But the most recent school construction that we had some challenges around, the siting of it and making sure it wasn't too big, too close to the property boundary, et cetera. So we have opportunity to work on that. And actually, that's a phase 3 development regs topic that we have on the list to work on with the comp plan update. So. Right. That's a great one. We do meet what we call Public Facilities 22, PF 22 meetings with the school districts that are coordination meetings. We recently have held those with Issaquah and with Lake Washington. We're about to have the Snoqualmie one. And during that, we did talk a lot about the comp plan process, HB 1220, the affordability brackets, what the different cities are doing, and also about some interesting ideas around different school campuses, being that Kirkland was part of that meeting with Lake Washington. And also, just for anybody out there listening, we do currently have a proposal that's in the door from Lake Washington School District. They own a piece of property in our town center, and they're looking at building a 9th grade campus. They've been through the pre-application meeting on that, and they're in early phase of design. So it will be an example of a little bit of a different school than a traditional 4-year campus design. It'd be a 9th grade campus.
Exactly. And also looking at, we already have interlocal agreements on fields, right, where we have sharing of resources. That's another thing as we look at, building out parks. Can we accommodate, and not have to build separate fields and parks just for the school, but we can have them be more shared resources. I know that seems to be working in a lot of areas as well, especially if you think about something like right in the town center where it's a 9th grade campus, you don't need a stadium, but what kinds of amenities might you need for that campus, and can we work together on that?
There's also opportunity in addition to that with our TDR program, given that school sites are potential sending sites for TDRs. So we do have the ability to envision some sort of interlocal or some sort of arrangement with school districts whereby they're able to send TDRs in exchange for something. Don't know what the answer to that one is yet, but that there is opportunity there.
And again, when we look at the mobility master plan or transportation master plan and things like that, as we plan these things out and we look at transit, we can also start to think a little bit outside the box on how we move the kids to and from the schools. If we can develop an intra-city transit system, then can we partner with the schools so they don't have to have a separate fleet of school buses and a separate set of drivers for that, but we can use an existing set of transit to move the kids around. That's worked for probably 100 years now in many places. And so, I think there are a lot of those types of innovative ideas. I don't envy you, because trying to work on all these ideas and pull them all together at a single point in time will be challenging. But we know our staff is up for the task.
I don't see any other hands. I will make a comment. I feel like I need to after everyone else did. I think I definitely couldn't pick like 1/8 of a mile, 1/4. I wish we had like Lime scooters or bikes or something, because then I feel more comfortable with like, oh yeah, a mile's fine. Because I think that is kind of a struggle getting to, what does 1 mile actually mean, probably not a sidewalk, half a sidewalk, that kind of thing. And I do love the map example for Redmond, so definitely greenlight that.
Great, thank you. And one thing we're going to be doing here is we're going to be pulling together a matrix of Q&A from this meeting. We're going to start to do that for all the meetings on the comp plan and on some of our other major projects to make sure we can track the things that come up. So we'll be wanting to, I don't know how we're going to post that after the meeting, but possibly with the, we'll have to figure out how to post that going forward and what we do with that.
Put it on the new website. That's right. Okay, so I know we need to extend. I know you are up next for your approval for the Critical Areas Ordinance Update Draft RFP. I'm not sure if 10:30 would work.
Yes, we see the critical areas RFP as a much faster conversation than the comp plan and HB 1220 and land uses.
Cool, awesome. Well, we can do 10:30 and then I guess adjourn early if somebody would like to make that motion.
I move that we extend the meeting till 10:30.
Second? All right, moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? All right, thank you. Okay, please proceed.
Yeah, nice to see you. Let's see. All right, there we go. All right, good evening again. David Pyle, Department of Community Development. Tonight is a follow-up meeting to our meeting back in July when we discussed the scope for the upcoming Critical Areas Ordinance. As we prepare for the release of the Request for Proposals, RFP, in early February, we thought this would be a good opportunity to come back and review the RFP scope of work one final time. And with me tonight, I have Miriam Leitner of Community Development. She has been promoted. You can see her there. Good evening, Miriam. As a refresher, the Critical Areas Update is required by the Washington State Growth Management Act, but also ensures we are meeting PSRC's multi-county planning policies and King County's countywide planning policies. The update also aligns with our comprehensive plan policies in the environment and conservation element and impacts other elements such as land use, which is why this work is being done concurrently with the 2024 comprehensive plan periodic update. The city of Sammamish has a slightly different definition than that of the state for critical areas, as you can see on screen. That's all right. As long as we're generally in alignment with it, that's okay. While the RCW has a more general definition of geologically hazardous areas that groups erosion, landslide, seismic, and other geologic hazard areas together, the city's code has them separated. Our code also includes streams due to prevalence of such water types that provide an abundance of habitat for salmonids and other aquatic fauna. This allows the city to ensure greater protection of sensitive habitats from the impacts of development. The scope of work for this project, which is reflected in the RFP, will include the state-required review of and updating of existing critical areas ordinance using best available science as defined by state law. In addition, we have added all areas of special focus, all the areas of special focus that we discussed this past summer. These include habitat corridors, fish-bearing streams, merging erosion hazard areas, landslide hazard areas, and seismic hazard areas together to create one geologic hazard area, climate change mitigation and prevention, increased preservation, and policy and regulation changes to better align with grant funding. I'll pass it over to Miriam for a review of the scope of work.
Thanks, David. So the scope of work for the project has been segmented into the categories that you see on screen, which are described in more detail in the RFP. In Exhibit 1, the scope is the same as what was presented to Council in July of 2022. Project management and coordination with the 2024 periodic update of the comprehensive plan will be ongoing throughout the project, as will public outreach and engagement. The project's first phase will be completing the existing conditions assessment, the best available science review, the gap analysis, and then presenting the results of all of that work to the Planning Commission, the City Council, and the public. After this, the consultant will work closely with the community, the Planning Commission, and the City Council to update the regulations in response to the findings from that review and the special focus areas that David mentioned earlier. Once drafted, the updated critical areas ordinance will go through legislative review and adoption. And then finally, the consultant will prepare training and materials for current and future staff and create non-technical informational materials for the public so that they can understand the critical areas rules. Next slide, please, David. Thank you. To give you a sense of the timing for the project, on screen you'll see the tentative project and meeting schedule included in the RFP. And while some of the dates might change based on input from the selected consultants, they do align with the work from our other projects that are planned for 23 and 24. So we anticipate that will likely stay more or less the same as here. Next slide, David. Thank you. The city is going to be distributing the RFP to firms on the MRSC roster and posting the RFP online on February 2nd, with proposals due on February 23rd at noon. We'll be interviewing finalists on March 8th to select a firm and then working with that firm to draft up the contract, which will be coming to council on April 18th with the contract start date of May 1st. Next slide, please, David. Thank you. So as we prepare to distribute the RFP in a few weeks, we wanted to check in and see if you have any questions. And we also wanted to see if council wanted to designate a representative to participate in interviews with the finalists, which will be held on March 8th. So I'll go ahead and hand things back to the mayor so we can get your questions and your input. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Council, any questions or motion? Councilmember Howe?
The comment I'll make is that when we did this to look at proposals before, I think we had 3 of us or 2 of us, 3? There were 3 of us, and I highly recommend having more than just one representative because staff loves working with us. That's the primary reason. And the other reason is because the more people that actually engage in this process, the smarter we are about the consultants you guys hire and what the criteria is, and we just get smarter about the project altogether. It's a really good learning opportunity. So I would volunteer for that.
All right, any questions about the RFP or Councilmember Treen?
Yeah, I agree with Councilmember Howe and would also be willing to be a representative. Thanks.
Councilmember Stewart?
I'm actually not volunteering to do that. But I did want to say I didn't have a chance to read through. Mary Wichter sent in an email about this, and I was able to skim it but not read it in detail. And I know she's always very thorough, but I don't know if anybody picked anything up specifically for the RFP. I think it might be more related to the contract, but I wasn't sure if there was anything in there that we wanted to try to apply.
So my sense is, based on the comments, my read through of her comments, there's some great background information,
Yeah.
and there's, she's been a very much an advocate of our taking on the geologic hazard areas.
Yes.
For years. She's been coming to council meetings and planning commission meetings, and so I think that she'll be very happy to work with us on that. There was a comment about shoreline master programs not being in alignment. The sad story there is that is a struggle that I also live on in my job, because the state mandates that they be updated out of sequence with each other. So consequently, you need to follow their timelines. So we will have to, once we update the critical areas rules, we then have to send them off to ecology and have them integrated into the shoreline master program. So there's an interesting relationship there that if you really care to know more about it, I'd be happy to explain that to you. It's one I've had to live through. There are some other comments that she had, which I think are very great comments that we definitely will take into consideration with the update. I don't know that it necessarily affects the consultant selection at this point in time.
Perfect.
We do, I feel, have adequate budget in the scope of work to take on the things she's raising in her comments. And I appreciate her comments on these topics, as she's someone who, lives it out there in her neighborhood and provides really real commentary about the effects of some of the things we address in our critical areas rules.
Excellent, thanks.
Deputy Mayor Lamb?
So I was looking through the contract, and we have Title VI in here, and I know that last year we talked about, and it is in our contracts, that we have a paragraph or something encouraging minority and business-owned minority business-owned people to apply, women as well, and that language isn't in RFPs. I mean, it's different. Title VI and encouraging women and minority-owned businesses to apply is like two different things.
If you remember, can I just by way of just we kind of inserted that original language on DEIB stuff kind of under the wire, because I wrote it, David put it into something, and we hadn't done the process correctly. And so I think everything got stopped at that point. Do you remember this? It was like one of our first council meetings, because I felt it was important to get you in trouble immediately with your boss. And so so we had to step back from that, and then the DEIB stuff that we're doing now should take it over. And does anyone else remember this?
Excuse me. I do remember this. I'm going to apologize up front because I don't remember the exact specific details, but I know that is the intent. And so we will go back and circle back and make sure that we are abiding by that. I think, as I recall, the Title VI is in relation to transportation projects, but we went back and built into our processes the components of those, of that.
And the other piece of that too is that if it was a contractor, they had to have their own DEIB program as well. So that was another sub-line that I had stuck in there.
Yeah, Title VI is saying that we don't discriminate. It's the Civil Rights Act of 1964 versus actively encouraging people to. Right. So it'd be great if it's in contracts and RFPs.
Miriam, do you have any feedback on that, or?
I will go with whatever the city policy is, but I'm happy to add it in. We have plenty of time until the 2nd to do so. I just need the language to get that in there. I'm also happy to look at what other cities are doing and see if we can get some examples.
Yeah, I was going to say search.
Yeah,
email.
I was looking for it. I couldn't find it, but
Yeah.
thank you,
It's in here
Miriam.
somewhere.
Yeah, and
Okay.
Council, Carrie is reminding me that I'm pretty sure that we did build this into our process because it is in the city attorney RFP process that just went out. So I just apologize up front because I don't remember the exact details, but I recall us going through this process and coming back to you all saying, this is what we're going to do and this is how we've changed our competitive bid process.
So I can go ahead and pull it from there and integrate that in. That's not a problem.
Yeah, thank you for that comment, and sorry if we missed anything. We're really good in our department at building out the technical content of an RFP. We're not the best always at the other RFP technical component, or the components of advertising it and what goes along with that. We rely largely on our counterparts in legal and city manager's office to help guide us through that.
So can we vote on it as amend or with that addition, or is that really a chunk of it? Like an important chunk of it?
If council wants to be specific, you're certainly welcome to, but we have the message loud and clear, yeah.
Deputy Mayor Lamb, since your hand is still up, I'll have you make the motion.
What is the motion? I motion that we approve the critical areas ordinance update draft request for proposal with the amendment that we add the language for encouraging women and minority-owned businesses to apply.
Second. All right, moved and seconded. Any other discussion on that? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Great, thank you. We will work with Debbie and with Scott to set up the interviews and get those of you who are interested in participating lined up. We definitely also really appreciate that additional feedback. I think it helps down the line with sort of the process and making sure that everyone's fully aware about what the steps we took to bring a consultant on board. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Miriam. So next up, we do have Mike Sugg for our external committee appointments. I don't know if Mike's taking it over. Oh, he's there. All right. Go for it, Mike.
Thank you, and good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and Council. Mike Sugg, Supervising Management Analyst. This agenda item provides Council time to make any updates to the membership. All right.
Sorry, Mike, that was me.
Not a problem, Lita. So as I was saying, this agenda item provides council with some time to provide any updates to the membership on your external committees. And to help guide your discussion this evening, I have a table that we can fill in with our updated appointments. So let me go ahead and pull that up. So additional information about each of the committees, such as the meeting locations and times, is included as Exhibit 1 to tonight's agenda bill. And if there are any, if there are multiple members interested in any one seat, it may make sense to take a vote to determine which member will be appointed. If there's only one council member interested in the seat, I think we can just look for head nods to confirm, because this is nothing too formal. And with that short introduction, I will turn it back to the mayor for discussion on council's preferences.
Councilmember Ndupure.
Yeah, I just wanted to let the staff know that I'm on the Regional Law, Safety and Justice Committee. It's a regional committee, so I'm on it, and I know it's not part of this list, so you might want to add that here.
Yeah. Thank you, Councilmember. Mayor, if I may, Councilmember Ndupure, these are not the Sound Cities Association appointed positions. These are ones that we directly appoint because we are members of them separately.
Got it. Okay, that's the difference. Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Howe.
So if we could, for just the time being, put Karen Howe as the member for Eastside Fire and Rescue, as our beloved mayor has a law class that takes her past the meeting time oftentimes. So for the time being, we just need to swap Karen Howe for Kaylee Clark. People get us confused all the time anyway.
Absolutely. I mean, I approve that for the year, I think, because I don't know what's going to happen in the fall.
Okay, well, we'll see.
Okay. I'm sorry?
Should Karen be the alternate for FAC then?
Yes. Yeah. The FAC alternate. Are you okay with that?
Oh, thank goodness.
I think that's it's like a nooner.
It depends.
Okay. Yeah. It's like in the day though. Sometimes. Okay. Is everyone good with that? So my classes on Thursdays now go until 4:45, unfortunately. So I'd be 45 minutes behind the start of these once a month. Is there any other movement or anything else? I don't see any hands. Councilmember Stewart?
I would really like to be either on or the alternate for the PIC, the SCA PIC. So, wrong.
I got confused. I'd actually like to stay on PIC. I don't know if that's an issue.
Oh, yeah, Scott, you go.
Mayor, I was just going to offer up, I don't know that Sound Cities has any problem if we designate a second alternate, if you will. The meetings are open to the public and anyone can attend, so if we send more than one alternate to the meetings, I think that's totally fine.
Yeah, I'm good with that. Councilmember Trine?
Well, I was just going to offer up that it would be fine to have somebody else move in. I've been on there 3 years, so it's kind of one of those things where it's really nice to move people through that get a different experience, and it is a really good committee to be on. So, but yeah, I would because if I want to attend, I can be a public member, and that's not a big deal. So I would hand that over. No problem.
Thank you.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. So let's swap. Councilmember Trine.
And then I just wanted to ask Councilmember O'Farrell, because I don't think she's actually the primary on any committee, if that's something.
Yeah, I'm
we
actually
could-
very happy where I'm at.
Okay.
Because I'm maxed out with all kinds of other things in my life too. So I'm a believer in not biting off more than you can chew, and I would hate to subscribe to a committee and then not be able to follow through on it. So I'm pretty happy with my lot. But thank you, Pam. I appreciate the heads up. Thank you.
Scott, did you have anything? No? Deputy Mayor Lamb?
Just had a question for Scott. I started going to the Municipal Waste Advisory Committee. Does this belong here?
We can certainly add that on, Deputy Mayor. Deputy Mayor is referring to the Municipal Solid Waste Advisory Committee, which is the collection of cities that are signed on to the regional contract for solid waste. The city staff has been attending, and the Deputy Mayor voiced interest in that, and so she's attending with city staff. So yeah, we're happy to add that to the list.
Councilmember Stewart?
I guess along the same lines, I attend the K4C, I forget what we call it, like a... Yeah, the K4C Friday, I'm trying to think of what it is. It's like the elected official, sort of almost like a... No, it's not a happy hour. It's like more of a focus group. So there are K4C meetings that occur that are open to all elected officials or open to the public, but then there's like an elected official work group, I think is what it's called. So I don't know if we want to add that on there, but...
Can we also
like to keep
add
doing
my
it.
birthday party planning committee on this?
No.
Okay.
If anyone else wanted to, I think we could have a second person if we wanted on the K4C elected official work group, if anyone else would be interested in attending that as well. It's quite interesting, and especially this time of year, we do a lot of advocacy work and testifying for bills in the state legislature, so it's pretty active right now.
Is it open to anybody? It's open to the public though, right?
It is not. This meeting is not, so we do have to limit it. And I don't know of any cities that have more than 2 people that ever attend, so I don't know that we want to overwhelm them.
Okay, well, I would be interested if no one else is.
Yeah, it's a Friday during the day, like 10 a.m. or something?
Yeah, it's usually Fridays at 10, so.
If that works? Yeah. Everyone else good with that? Cool. All right, any other changes? Is your hand?
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. I
No,
just want to
I
make
didn't
sure.
mean to.
Yeah, all right. Thank you so much, Mike. I think this is it unless you had anything else.
That's it for me. Thank you, Council.
Great. Do we have any verbal council reports and/or a city manager report? Councilmember Inupure?
Yesterday, I toured the Garage Teen Cafe with one of the youth board members, and they were so excited. So I hope they can, talk to their peers. And there is talk about doing like a teen-to-teen committee to see the interest here in Sammamish. But It was so wonderful to tour that with a student and just to see their excitement and also recognize the need for that space in Sammamish. And with, so many high schools here, that space is specifically dedicated to high school kids. Fun and unstructured time is really encouraged, and it's a wonderful space for nurturing. So I was very excited to do that tour.
And they have free coffee.
Lost, didn't.
And they have a new drum set.
Oh, awesome.
Like a real one, not the electronic one.
Oh, I don't know if that's awesome.
I think that's awesome.
Very loud. Yeah, no, I like that. Yeah, it's a great place. Councilmember Stewart?
Yeah, speaking of K4C, the legislative session has begun, and Deputy Mayor Lamb sent out one notification about the RAP Act, which is a producer responsibility law that almost passed the legislature last year, and hopefully we can get it over the finish line this year. So I will send out the list of different bills that are coming up where there are opportunities to either, write to our representatives or actually testify in some of the meetings for or against some of these bills. So I will try to share that on a regular basis. And that made me think, Mike, I haven't seen an update from our lobbyists. And usually at this point, we're usually getting probably at this point we'd be getting weekly updates. It'll start to become daily as time accelerates through the legislative session and we come upon deadlines. But are we going to get an update from our lobbyists?
I know that our lobbyists have sent us an update on bills that are receiving public hearings for the week, but I can certainly ask them to provide a write-up for council on a more regular basis.
Did we get one of those? Because I haven't seen one recently. When did I miss that? But that was a while ago.
That
was like a couple last week? Oh. Okay.
Let me double check to make sure that was sent to the city council, and if not, I will make sure to forward that on.
Great. And I may have missed it, so thank you.
Absolutely.
And many of those are now hybrid, which we talked about today, the hearings, so you can actually not have to drive to Olympia.
Yeah, you can do, you can testify. The good news is you can testify online. The bad news is lots of people do. So if you do plan to testify, you may be sitting on hold for a really long time. But there are also other ways to, kind of provide information. And then we can, as a council as well, if there are things that we think are really important, we could even, put together a letter if we so chose to do something on some of these. I'm focused mostly on the environmental stuff through the K4C, but some of them they're pretty cool and be really great to see them go through.
I saw the red light. I didn't know. Did you have a report or anything?
Just a couple of quick items, Mayor, to follow up on the conversation around the legislature and individual council member interests. I'll channel my inner Mike here and just remind that if you're going and testifying on behalf of something that you're interested in, to please make it clear that it's not on behalf of council. And that for those things that are obviously on our legislative priorities, obviously, we'll have our lobbyists weighing in. And then if there's something that comes up, obviously we can try to do, like Councilmember Stewart said, a letter or anything like that. So again, encourage folks to get involved and to watch for those updates. I know the session, this is a long session, so it starts up just a touch slower than the short session does. Takes a little longer to really get into the full swing of things, but by this time next week, they will be going full guns. Along those lines, I do want to share out, I want to say thank you to those that have chosen to join for the AWC Legislative Conference in February. I think that's going to be really good. It hasn't been in person for 3 years, so I think there's going to be a lot of interest and a lot of folks down there to participate and go up on the Hill and lobby our delegation on behalf of the city. One other quick reminder, since this is the last council meeting until our retreat. The retreat is Saturday, the 28th of this month. Just want to remind that out for anyone who might still be with us this evening, from 8:30 to 5 on Saturday the 28th. I know. For those of us that are required to be there, yes, we will be providing food. For the public, no, we will not be providing food.
All right, thank you. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. Seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.